For you today, this is without question my favorite topic. So grew up in workforce development, a baby of workforce development, so excited to present the mayor's vision on workforce development here for you today. First, we always start off with the mayor's vision, you know, one city with one bright future, and the different pillars that impact his delivery of service across government. As many of you know, as he campaigned for office, Mayor Dickens saw firsthand the many challenges that were kind of brought to bear to our economy by the combination of the public health emergency as well as some antiquated policy. And so his solution for that is the Department of Labor. And so today I'll provide an overview of the department focused on the mayor's...
Mr. Don, can you hang out? Hold on. Can I ask the folks that are coming into if the door needs to be shut, there's a lot of noise that's drifting in here. Thank you. Mr. Donald.
Yeah, no problem. So we'll start the overview of the department kind of focused on the mayor's pillars and give you a little bit of an overview of the public workforce system and the year one goals of the department. I think the key area is that when we talk about labor, innovation, and all of the things that touch a city of opportunity for all is the mayor's pillar that this is truly focused on. In FY23, we've had some successes as we've kind of started and tried to lay the building blocks for the Department of Labor. First, he established it by partnering with the council to create the enabling legislation, as well as hiring the first staff member, Ms. Embry, who is to our right, who I know many of you are probably familiar with from her days leading AXME, and now she is here serving the city and kind of helping us move labor forward, which we'll dive into a little later, and you'll be able to hear some comments from her. We've also added to the capacity in the mayor's office Ms. Tanika Jackson, who is a former CFO, deputy CFO for the city of Chattanooga, as well as the deputy county administrator and CFO for the city of Augusta, who focuses in organizational management and financing, has also joined us to make sure that not only our mayor's office operates appropriately, but the Department of Labor leads in the way that it is. So honored to serve with these two young ladies. In addition to that, we launched the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program funded by ARPA, and in year one, more than 3,000 young adults got their first career opportunity and delved into that. This year, we plan to do even more. I think you know the mayor just had signing day for this year's piece where AT&T, our hospital system, McDonald's, Publix, the aquarium, and many others, including the YMCA to help us resolve lifeguard issues, all came out to partner. We also partnered with Councilmember Boone and former Mayor Shirley Franklin to host some on-site events at Mays High School, which was very successful with more than 400 youth coming on board this summer. I think you heard from Councilmember Lewis as well that we recently held an on-site at Roselle Fan to be able to sign up more than 350 young adults. So we're moving, South Atlanta. So, no, that's right. South Atlanta was the one that you were talking about, but Roselle Fan was the next day where more than 300 young adults were able to attend. We also provided $1.8 million to Atlanta Technical College, and we've already started to increase our capacity over there by acquiring $700,000 in additional state funds. We have Ms. Sonia Wilson Westmoreland with us today. She currently is the interim at WorkSource Atlanta, and it's helping us bridge the gap as we build the Department of Labor. So I did want to recognize that we have Ms. Wilson Westmoreland with us today as well. So very quickly, I will just kind of highlight the public workforce system because I think that's very important to understand why there's even a need for the Atlanta Department of Labor. Just what you see on the screen and in your binders is just that the federal workforce system, it can be a really complicated thing. The federal government is the primary funder for all workforce activities nationwide. They distribute funding to states. The governor is what would be considered the chief locally elected official in that system, and then those funds flow from the governor's office to his administrator. In this case, it's the Technical College System of Georgia. They then fund the local system, which Atlanta is a part of. And so the city of Atlanta is a fiscal agent for WorkSource Atlanta, which is one of, well now, as of July 1, 18 workforce areas. I'll dive into that as well. So one thing I would highlight, because I know this is new to everybody, what you'll see on this slide is that when this workforce system was created, yours truly was the primary crafter. And so we developed, while at the state, a system of providing guidance to local areas like Atlanta, which we call workforce implementation guidance letters. And so those letters are the core of what this system does. So I am excited to serve in this role for the mayor and also bring that expertise of creating the state system. So I think we're well positioned to do so in the local system as well. Moving back to that, to just make it clear, Atlanta is one of originally 20 workforce areas. There are 2 mergers that will happen in July. We're local workforce development area 3, so we are one of 18. It is implemented by the Technical College System of Georgia, where there are 639 apprenticeship programs. So we would end up trying to develop additional ones and deliver them through the Atlanta Department of Labor and Employment Services. Again, one of 19, but soon to be 18 local areas, and there are more than 50,000 participants statewide. Now, we want to increase that number quite a bit by adding capacity. And so when we look at the case for the Department of Labor, I think it's a clear and simple one, but for the edification of our public, I'll just give you a little bit of detail. Right now, there are drastic changes and really an attack on workforce development that has been going on since around 2015, 2016. The federal system is about 50 years old. I know that myself and Councilmember Lewis grew up in the PIC program here in Atlanta. Both got our first jobs there. I'm a little bit older than he is, not much. I think my first one was at Capitol View, where I was a program manager. I think I got fired on my 3rd day, and gave me some of the best lessons in life I could ever get. But, you know, growing up as a city of Atlanta kid and really having access to my first job through the workforce system is the reason why I and our mayor had his first job through it as well, and why we're so dedicated to it. But over the last 5 years, Georgia has lost 30% of workforce funding, and the city of Atlanta has seen those decreases as well. On this slide, what you will see is year over year, while there have been more funds put in the workforce system, the state of Georgia and effectively the city of Atlanta has had great reductions, which is why it's very important that we put, you know, our money into the pot to be able to deliver better. I'd also say that the federal performance guides are very stringent and strict, and makes our ability to serve the least of these and the hardest to serve very difficult. But our proposal for the Atlanta Department of Labor actually rectifies that. And with that, let's kind of hop into our organizational chart and an overview of operations. In lieu of giving a traditional org chart that just talks about headcount, with the department still being rather small, I wanted to make sure we pulled out the functions so you could see the true impact of what the Department of Labor will provide. So you have your commissioner, and in the slighted gray area, you still have a local workforce development board that allows you to receive about $3.2 million annually, which you actually get to spend over a 2-year period, which is a little bit different than our 1-year budget. So they receive their allocation in 2-year blocks, and the city of Atlanta, through WorkSource Atlanta, receives about $3.2 million. With that $3.2 million, there are also additional grants that come along with it. I think I mentioned the $700,000 that'll come from the state. We've also put ARPA funding in to the tune of $2.2 million this year to be able to make sure that we deliver the summer youth employment program as well. So again, this org chart doesn't necessarily represent bodies, but the capacity that we deliver through WorkSource Atlanta, and now the Atlanta Department of Labor and Employment Services. So we've kind of split it into 3 service areas. One of them is administrative services. That ensures that the data and performance collection can be delivered and aligned with those federal regulations. I think it was kind of well documented that back in around 2014, 2015, Atlanta had some challenges in kind of keeping up with that performance. This structure allows us to make sure that that never happens again. In addition to that, when you're looking at those federal funds and those diminishing funds and us putting a little bit of local money as well as other grant funds, very important that you're able to split fund positions and then be able to use different funding sources to deliver programs. So that's why we have the grants and accounting function that we provided. We also have added a labor and innovation office, and I think while it is listed as a single function under that service area, it's one of our more important. When you hear about the mayor partnering with Delta and SEIU and others to be able to raise the cost of those cleaners from, sub $10 an hour to an average of $15 an hour, that comes out of a shop like this, which is why Ms. Embry is such an important teammate and member for us. The second service area, we're just calling it WIOA. Ms. Sonia Wilson-Westmoreland, who has joined us here today, she oversees that function now as the interim director over WorkSource Atlanta and will continue in that stead overseeing it as the de facto division manager. So everything from your one-stop operator, which we have elevated to report directly to the commissioner to make sure that the highest levels of this department oversees that function. And then you have a third function, which is kind of our signature program. So SYEP, the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute, will be announcing apprenticeship ATL and also some customized programming that we're calling ATL Quick Path that allows us to go meet with IKEA, as the mayor mentioned, or AT&T, or all these other partners who are bringing businesses to Atlanta but struggle to have a workforce. Well, we'll be able to customize programs to deliver to them. So again, a functional org chart more than just a head count so that you can understand the true and full breadth of this new organization. With that, just going into the budget trends, very simple slide because there's not a lot of general fund money going into this effort. The $500,000 actually has 2 sources, I would say. The first thing is under WIOA, there is what is called an indirect cost rate. It allows the fiscal agent to receive a percentage of the grant for things that you do in the back office. That's accounting and IT and other administrative services. There is what's called a de minimis cost rate, which is 10%, which I believe we utilize in the city of Atlanta. So it goes back into the pool and you never see it again, but that is the purpose. Previously, when the previous council decided to partner with Invest Atlanta to connect economic and workforce development, you shipped about $500,000 over there. And so what we did, since it's coming back to the city, is just provide those funds back to the Department of Labor to be able to utilize as startup funds for 4 new positions, 2 of which connect. They will work under Ms. Embry and help connect us to HR as well as labor to provide education and other activities. The other 2 are the actual commissioner and your administrative services deputy. It should be noted that we do plan to charge those to the WIOA grant because of our setup. Up to 80% of their salary will be able to be offset by the grant. So that is the plan for that. And then in future years, we would use that $500,000 to deliver even more services. If you go to the next slide, it just illuminates that and kind of highlights that there are some administrative positions that already exist in addition to this 4, giving you a total of 12. I know you've seen more bodies and activities at Pollard, but the reason for that is those are grant funded, but also secondly, you have the contract with Equus, who delivers direct services on behalf of the city. And so I think that is a little bit more than about $1 million or so also from the grant to be able to deliver case management services and others. Those other folks that are in the grant, they actually continue to deliver those services for people who accessed before EQUIS came on board. So you're basically running two programs there, and of course we'll be looking at that in future years as well. Again, highlighting on this last slide that 4 funded FTEs out of the 500,000 general fund, and again, we do plan to transition those on. Moving on quickly, because I know we're behind on time, labor and innovation. Again, one of the key things that the mayor wanted to add capacity on is ensuring that we support our labor partners, but also really fair labor practices, employment and increased wages throughout, not only here in the city of Atlanta, but also throughout our ecosphere and everyone we touch, kind of looking at the operations of everyone from MARTA if they need help with negotiations, the airport and others. And so our first hire in FY23 was Miss Humetta Embry. She is kind of tasked with educating employers and workers about state and federal labor laws, as well as requirements and the claim filing process, because we are not an enforcement entity. The Department of Labor does that, but many times when someone does not understand, let's say Davis-Bacon laws, for example, or if they're experiencing wage theft, they don't know how to fill out an application or where they can go, and this office will help with that while also helping our skilled labor partners who train better than just about anyone else in the world connect to our funding with the eligible training providers list. And so, Ms. Embry, if you wanted to chime in and give some insights on your work now.
Sure, thank you, Chief Donald. Greetings, Chair and Committee, Council. I would like to just harp on a couple of things that Chief Donald had already expressed. We are currently working on a public education program that will launch later this year to educate the public on exactly how we can be a better service to them. And also, 3 of the top priorities for the labor portion of this department, I don't know if you all are aware, but the first and the second are actually helping and advocating for our union partners, both internally and externally. And then also, as Chief Donald stated, just being an overseer of labor laws and enforcement at all levels throughout the city of Atlanta. And so externally, we've already have been partnering with ATU, which is the MARTA union, and SEIU, which is the union for the airport janitorial staff, helping with their labor negotiations, and then also helping with our internal union partners, AFSCME, PACE, Police and Fire, through this budget cycle and with their labor negotiations as well. So I'll defer back to you, Chief.
Yeah, and I think one big thing is, because we want to make clear, you know, the HR department manages 99.9% of those functions, but you know when it's time to get a deal done anywhere, folks call on the mayor, they call on council, and they call on others. Ms. Embry's office is really focused on making sure that, you know, when the mayor, while it looks like he's everywhere and can be everywhere, he cannot. And so there is a representative to help us when we are working through those negotiations with our own internal folks, or if there are insights externally that people want in representation of the mayor. She is that face, she is that voice, and that subject matter expert. As we move into just looking at our priorities for FY24, again, we return to those 4 pillars, and the one that is really our main focus is ensuring a city of opportunity for all. And I think we've highlighted that in that work, but I did want to highlight some of the key activities that are taking place as we speak, closing in on the announcement and appointment of the commissioner for this department. We actually do have an offer out for the deputy that I mentioned over the grants and administration portion, high-ranking official who leads that work for the state. And so really excited to have that type of expertise here on the local level. Also think it gains you favor with the folks who fund you, which is very important to us. We'll also be transitioning our work source staff into this broader department, which is actually happening now, as well as incorporating right now. SYP happens at the mayor's office. We are eager to pass that on to this new department and have them administer it, while also launching the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute for about 20 young adults to be able to be exposed to careers all around the state, as well as get some of those soft skills, including things like tying a tie, preparing for interviews and things of that nature that will go over, but also those customized training activities that I mentioned, work experience year-round like you get in the summer, as well as on-the-job training and apprenticeships. And so with that, that concludes our presentation and overview of the new department.
All right, thank you, Chief Donald. With that, we're going to open it up for questions. I see Dozier, followed by Lewis, and then Overstreet, and then Boone, and we'll go from there. So, Councilmember Dozier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Donald. And good to see you, Ms. Embry. I'm glad to see that we'll be working alongside one another here at the City of Atlanta. So that's really exciting. Just a quick question, just with regards to the longer term goals of this department beyond this fiscal year. I recognize that a lot of this work is geared towards setting it up, doing the transition. Looking at the functional organization structure, I feel like I get a sense of where the department is heading, but could you talk a little bit about what maybe y'all's timeline is beyond this fiscal year? So, like, for instance, this Deputy of Signature programs to be named later. When is that looking like being stood up? What is that transition? This year?
Absolutely. So
okay.
The organization, we're lucky that, you know, you have your single year funding, which is your general fund, but there are also other pots that we want to be able to leverage and then spread out. You have the $4 million from the Gulch agreement that, again, allows you to blend funding. You have $2.2 million that we allocated for the summer youth program, but there's about another $800,000 or so that is available to also launch some of those programs and get them started immediately. In addition to that, the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute for this iteration has been sponsored by AT&T.
Okay.
We'll be coming back to the council to ask for the ability to be able to receive sponsorship dollars so that some of these signature programs can be delivered in partnership with the private sector. But the mayor is really focused. I think you've heard him say that we want a city built for delivery, and so he does not want to go beyond this fiscal year without standing these functions up. Now, some of them, as I think you alluded to, will take a little time, and they'll be towards the end of the fiscal year, but we do expect to have the organization fully functioning by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, and then so as y'all are anticipating that growth, I imagine there's KPIs or SLAs attached with those various functions. Do y'all have anything y'all can share offhand about what that looks like? I recognize with WIOA, at least with that portion, that's been functioning for a while. There's probably reports that we have with the state or with their funding agencies and so forth and so on to determine that. But at least for the signature programs, I'm really interested to know how many Atlantis are intending on serving, what any other, like, are we looking at retention rate data? Like, we get somebody placed into a job, how long they stay in a job? I'm just curious what y'all are thinking as far as.
So you hit all of the things.
Right.
So I'll tell you, WIOA really does, the performance in WIOA sets the baseline, and we'll use those same things. The issue with WIOA, which, look, as somebody that's worked in it in 3 iterations now, from all the way back to SEA to WIA and now WIOA, the performance measures are very stringent, and it really allows you or focuses you in on serving the highest caliber of resident. And so we'll use WIOA to be able to do that, and we'll have the same performance categories and KPIs, but the metrics will be different. It is very similar to the model that we launched while I was in the District of Columbia, which is recognized now as the best workforce system in the country. And so we leveraged our local funding to augment our federal program, but to be able to serve 3 times that. For example, now the numbers were very different. There we received about $25 million from the federal government, and we had about another $200 million for our local program. This model is very similar to that, and to be able to serve much larger numbers. And so right now, I think on average, you could say about 400 folks are being served. We're hoping and expecting to serve probably probably about 3 times that, and we've got a great jump on that through our youth summer program. The WIOA summer program, I think last year served 50 to 100. We did 3,000, and so we expect to have that type of scale by adding these resources.
Okay. And then just my last question is with eligibility for these programs. We're talking about city funds, making sure they're serving Atlantans, but also recognize too, we are dealing with a population that is much more transient now than it's ever been due to the lack of affordable housing in the city. I don't know how y'all are already managing that through like the mayor's summer youth program and some other programs that ostensibly serve Atlantans, but people move and we see it in our rec centers and our rec center data. Can you unpack a little as far as what y'all are thinking as far as what that looks like and whether that will be tracked separately if you have X number of participants that may not currently live in the city of Atlanta, but even maybe working with other departments to get them back into the fold and back into the city.
So again, great questions that are very much in line with our process. So one thing we did is we came to the council maybe about a month ago and asked for an opportunity to pursue a grant to get a larger, broader system. The Ripple system, I think is research investing in people. It's actually a state system that Atlanta will be the only, I think there are about 30 people in the grant cohort, and the city of Atlanta is the only city. Everyone else is a state. And so Scott Jensen, who used to be my counterpart in Rhode Island, the state director, is actually the executive director of that program, and it will allow us to take all of our funding sources and all of our participants and let them flow through one system, and it will talk to the state system, which we're required to measure performance on. But very similar to what the federal requirements are, Atlanta has to serve Atlantans. But when you're looking at dislocated workers and other activities, then if your job was in Atlanta, then you could choose to be served by Atlanta. I would imagine that people will take full advantage of that, with us now being one of the most well-resourced workforce systems in really the Southeast. And so we will, just like we do with our summer program, you have to be an Atlanta resident, even though it's federal funds, and ARPA allows you a little bit of flexibility. We stick solely to serving Atlanta with those federal caveats. So if it's a dislocated worker program, you've received a warrant notice or something of that nature, then you are able to, because you worked in Atlanta, receive services from us.
Yeah, and just thinking out loud, and Hampshire will turn a little bit. I know you have fair housing considerations, but I wonder too, as folks are in programs like this and wanting to make sure they can continue to grow and thrive in Atlanta, especially as we serve young people, and making sure that the next generation of Atlantans, as they go through employment programs, linking them up with housing programs as well, I think is going to be key. So just making sure that we're working with Atlanta Housing, working with Invest Atlanta, working with all of our jurisdictional partners to keep those opportunities full. I think we'll even incentivize being a part of that program, because those opportunities wait you on the other end of it. So sticking out loud, but I appreciate this effort.
So that's how the system works, actually. So the one-stop system, the American Job Center system, is what it's technically called. And that system is actually coordinated at 818 Pollard. So you have Atlanta Housing, the Department of Labor, our offices, and many, many others all in one spot. That's why they call it the one-stop, no open door. And actually, I think Open Door is the name of our one-stop operator. But that is actually exactly what is there. You should be able to access everything from housing to employment to training to counseling and all of those other things in one stop. And so, again, limited resources coming from the federal government, and so this allows us to expand on that, plus add that labor support.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and Mr. Chair, you.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Thank you, Mr. Donald. The memories that you brought up about the PIC program earlier were impressive to me, because my first job with the city was at Brown Mill Golf Course on Cleveland Avenue through that same PIC program. So I appreciate bringing it back. I think the thing that changed it was that we started the program was so successful, we started working with people who weren't from the city of Atlanta. We started allowing other people in if they came and did certain things. And so I love when I heard you say Atlanta programs, Atlanta dollars stay in Atlanta. And you know that song that say not Atlanta? And if your mayor's not Mayor Andre Dickens, you probably can't get these resources. So I truly appreciate that portion. I hope it stays that. And I understand that some students are going to come in there, but we can't hire them. And we have to make sure these dollars are for young people from Atlanta full out. So I appreciate you on that. Your grasp of the content was almost like you read it off the back of your hand. And that means that you are fully involved in what's going on. I know how busy you are, so I appreciate you giving the presentation today and us hearing that. The investment in youth went up the day the mayor got elected, went up the day I got elected. Our first meeting together was only about talking about kids. And so I'm putting dollars in their pockets. So we're seeing it in action. And so much so that we have, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Stephen Lee over at WorkSource and your hire, because they don't say no. Every kid we've sent down there, they've said yes to. They found them a job within 1 week, every single kid. So even though folks couldn't make the job fairs or the job, we had an interview fair, not a job fair, right?
Interview fair.
Even if the kids couldn't make the interview fair, if they go down and talk to Dr. Stephen Lee, they can still get a job. Lastly, I want to say the hiring of Miss Embry. When you and I both got on green, right? So we know we come from the mean green machine.
Mean green machine.
And I'm extremely proud to see the work we're doing. I see your fingerprints all over this, which is why I don't have questions about the stuff you explained, because I hear it in you. I see it in her, the way she was listening to you as you was talking. She didn't make no facial expressions. I'll say that. So I appreciate you, Mr. Odie, for coming in today and giving this presentation. I can't wait to see where this department goes. I think this is the department that we talked a little earlier about the COLA, cost of living adjustments. This is the department that's going to make sure that folks get their COLAs. This is the department that's going to negotiate some of these high tension rooms, from what I just heard you say too.
Right. Yes,
And you
sir.
couldn't have chose a better person. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'll start right there. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you.
On the city side.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I'm so glad that we do now have a Department of Labor. So I'm always speaking about making sure that we're using our dollars for city services. And so this is the type of thing that I believe in, because it says that this is something that's important to the city, that we're standing up our own department for it. And those are the things that I don't mind spending our dollars on. This makes sure that we're keeping everyone hired, trained, and compensated properly. And that's how you build a really good, robust, thriving city. So I support this department 100%. I, too, just want to share this, too. I, too, am a WorkSource baby, and I don't think people know that. I grew up, my mother actually worked with my executive assistant's mother at Westlake at the Atlanta Job Corps Center for decades.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up as a baby there. My mother went on to be center director over a couple cities for a span of 38 years. So I am very much committed to paying for skill set, making sure that our youth that aren't interested in college have a good, strong, solid lifestyle right here in the city of Atlanta. So I support this department more than you guys probably know. Would love to make sure that we have more than 4 positions in the future. I'm looking forward to seeing how the transition from Invest Atlanta Housing WorkSource to get it under the Department of Labor. I certainly like doing this better than passing money out to other entities around us indiscriminately. I just really like everything about having a Department of Labor right here, especially since on the national level, on the federal level, they really have decided where to place those dollars. Once upon a time, they actually used to sanction and fund the Job Corps Center here, and then that was contracted out, and then it went away. So, here we are, and we're grabbing that baton and running with it in the right way. So I appreciate that. Talking about the numbers, 4 positions, $500K, is that salary only?
Yes, ma'am. So, but remember, these positions will be split funded. So, right now, your director would be funded 100% by the WIOA grant. Because we have additional funding sources, then you would actually spread those costs across. So, it's not a true depiction of the cost of those positions, with the exception of the 2 that will support Ms. Embry.
Okay, so next year, this time, we'll look to
You'll
see
see
what
totally.
those salaries are, and we'll hopefully add a couple. I'm open to that budget amendment. Want to really grow this department. That's where I stand. So I guess that's it. Just want to make sure you all know how supportive I am and why. I actually have a backstory. This is important to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Donald, first, thank you for loaning your background in this area to the city of Atlanta. When I first heard your name several years ago, it was related to WorkSource. So wanting to just thank you for loaning your background to this area. This department is so important for the growth, development, and vitality of this entire city. So very important. So again, to Mayor Andre Dickens, thank you for your vision. Dr. Stephen Lee is a man who has worked very hard in Southwest and Northwest Atlanta. So I do want to thank him for being present at all times in my community, in all communities. I want to ensure that those kids that have not been able to get their birth certificates and Social Security cards, that we do save slots for them for our summer program. Some of their parents have been calling and say, hey, I need another 2 or 3 days. So let's try to get a counselor on hand to work with those kids that are having issues. Ironically, before the passing of Breasia Powell, we were at Mays High School. I see some graduates out there. One of our deputy commissioners is a Mays High Raider and our mayor. So, and my great seatmate, our District 11 council member, we were there on hand. Chief Donald, myself, Mayor Franklin, and others were there providing jobs and providing career paths for those kids. So again, this department is so important to the growth and vitality of our community and our city. I have never been prouder to be a member of this body during the passing of young Breasia. This mayor, this staff, wrapped their arms around this entire family, not missing a beat. So I want to take the opportunity to thank the Mayor's Office of Constituent Services, who worked arm in arm. Mr. Chief Donald and Mr. Clay, Ms. Vanessa Manley, Mr. Demetrius were there every step of the way. But the Department of Labor is going to make sure that those that need work and need training, that will happen for those families so that they can be working class folks in our community. And to see Ms. Embry here is a breath of fresh air. We know that those will be taken care of. Thank you all so much. And I just want to make sure that those kids that are having those problems, because there are some, and they've given up. I don't know where to get my birth certificate. I don't know where to get my Social Security card. And one of my teachers is looking at me, Mr. Greg Pridgeon, the man that trained me. Thank you, we would always want to take care of those children that don't know where to get those documents. And summer will pass and they won't have them. So let's put somebody on that who needs help. Again, thank you all so much.
Mr. COO, good to see you back here again. Just one question. If the 500K covers salaries, what about the rest of the operational expenses of this outfit?
So the bulk of them are eligible under the grant dollars that we already have through WIOA. Again, through that indirect cost rate as well as the additional grant funds that we receive. So one example for the operations, and each of those grants have administrative costs that you can leverage for that. So I'll just use the state $700,000 funding that we receive is focused on homeless, goodness, hard to serve, and I apologize, I've forgotten the 3 different categories, but we'll be able to deliver in that fashion. And since 818 Pollard is the official one-stop, and we have the one-stop operator there, those costs are actually coordinated through the one-stop. So we're just adding capacity on top of it.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
I almost said good morning. It's 3 o'clock. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. You have like one of my favorite people on the planet heading up
Absolutely.
Ms. Embry here. So I'm very glad that I now have an excuse to harass her every day and have her pick up my calls. So I also want to echo how excited I am that this department has been established. You are also someone that I also enjoy very much. So one of the first things I wanted to ask that we've already talked about is, and I want to give a shout out to the carpenters on this and to Brett Hume on this, because the apprenticeship program that we wanted to do, we've done some digging in with legal, and it turns out that we might be it looks like we are preempted on this by the state. So I think my question is, would we be able to utilize this office to also try to work with the state to change some of that legislation that may not have been meant to inherently limit what we can do for our working class, because I don't think any of us want that. Because also there's no higher rate of return than investing in workforce development. So I'm wondering if that's an opportunity and how we can be helpful with that, or should we just get out of your way and allow you to talk to the state?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say, so while I was in Savannah, I used to lead Coastal Workforce Services, and we started a labor utilization program. And so you cannot necessarily have an ordinance. It does preempt you from doing that, but there are policies that you can add in to incentivize those. And so we had a little bit of success with it. Actually, during my time with the state, we did fast track. We actually did fast track Savannah when I left Savannah to go to the state. And what we did was partner with the local logistics offices or organizations to basically incentivize them to bring on local Savannah residents for their ramp up. And so we could do the same thing here. It just could not be in an ordinance. It would have to be through policy. You can also leverage your work experience, on-the-job training, and other tools that are already in the toolbox to deliver. And we could still do that in partnership with the council. It is just likely not in the form of an ordinance.
Well, then I also want to apologize because I put a lot of months of work into that and trying to research it before I realized the preemption. Yes, rookie mistake, but learned a lot. But can I, Mr. Donald, is that something I can reach out to you all about and seeing how I can help? Because the next question was around the vocational training piece and bringing that back into our public schools and talking to a lot of teachers. The thing, and APD is that, you know, it used to be 9th grade. We were losing these kids, 10th grade. We're losing them at 6th and 7th grade. I'm having to bury 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, so many this year, you know, because, and I don't want to put that blame on the parents at all, because there's also, redlining is still very real today. We don't talk about it as much, but food apartheid is real. All of those things are real. We're not, the world, not us, not just us, we're not doing a good job of setting these kids up to succeed. And I see this as an opportunity, that apprenticeship program and doing vocational training. And the big thing I hear from unions is that their numbers are depleted and they want to aim younger for their membership. And the school to prison pipeline is still very real. So if we could work on trying to integrate this. I mean, it's perfect for Year of the Youth and something I know the mayor, we want to continue Year of the Youth well past this year. But this could be an opportunity, and I'm just stating it as I know you already know all of this, because I would like to be a resource on that. You and I have talked about this.
Yes.
Ms. Embry and I have talked about this for years. And I think the other piece I've also talked to APD and other principals about is that these kids that maybe our teachers are stretched thin, kids that have parents that work 2-3 jobs or in a single parent household that act out at school, end up getting repeatedly suspended or face expulsion, and then they don't have anything to do with the day because they don't have that support structure, so they turn to crime. And they turn to a structure that oftentimes can be a gang or other illicit activity because they need to survive. And so if there's an opportunity also, rather than, for example, suspending a kid, trying to put them on a track towards an apprenticeship program and working with them on that so that we're not putting them back out on the street to break into cars, steal a gun, and just to do something, that a kid would do because they haven't really fully fleshed out right and wrong yet in that moral code. And also, like I started making a map years ago looking at where there was higher suspension rates, low graduation rates, and unemployment rates. And I think having a targeted approach in those areas first, I think we would see huge returns in the first 2 years of this. So is that something we can also work on?
Oh, absolutely. And I think some of those efforts are already happening. And, I would credit Ms. Wilson Westmoreland, who is here with us today. So in the WIOA program, the out-of-school youth is really the focus. So those who have been disconnected. But there's also an opportunity where 25% of those WIOA funds go to in-school youth and those who are actually kind of teetering towards exiting. And so Atlanta has a dynamic program already. And the hope is to leverage some of these new resources to be able to expand that. So as we think through it and try to figure that out, it's a great opportunity for you to get engaged.
And also just coming up with the talking points so that we can have the opportunity to circulate that out here, and then also focusing on advertising something like that through pre-roll. Like my district is one of the youngest, and so and I have a lot of parents in my district that need this help. The pockets are much smaller than other districts because people have been pushed out, and because there's portions of my district that are just as expensive as North Fulton. But still, like for example, pre-roll would be huge. Like people aren't watching regular TV anymore. They're Netflix, Hulu, YouTube TV, all these things, and being able to target specific IP addresses in areas where we know we're having higher rates of crime from kids, where we know there's either under enrollment or low graduation rates. It could be huge, and we know that we're putting it directly in front of that consumer, like in front of that person, in front of that consumer. And I would just love for all of I would love to be briefed on that to find out how we can be of best help to communicating that to our districts. Thank you for that. And the next piece, misclassification. So I know that the state made that, finally decided to make that illegal. And I also want to give another shout out to the carpenters because their white paper on this was brilliant, talking about how many hundreds of millions the state are missing out on, how many millions we're missing out on. And I talked to the painters and other unions, and they're saying, we have contractors that are coming in and hiring people off of Indeed, like sandblasters, people that are sandblasting bridges that do not have the qualifications for these things. And on top of having the inability to invest more in infrastructure and shortages, we also are having people that don't actually know how to do the job, but they're desperate for work, so they're being hired off of Indeed. They're being 1099 instead of W-2'd, so they're not getting proper health insurance, proper pay, and then we're also being robbed of millions of tax dollars. So could you, Mita, would you mind speaking? I remember you said that was an enforcement issue. Could you kind of elaborate on that, and if we can use this to target that?
Correct, yes, and we're definitely going to start beefing up our relationship with the state labor department, like you and I have discussed previously. And also with that, this department will help educate the painters union and their members, and also businesses as it relates to this misclassification, because it is running a little rampant right now.
Yeah.
But it's probably important for us to say, because we don't have those enforcement capabilities. That's at the state level. When in the district levied the first fine in the district's history, and I think we collected over $60 million in fines related to misclassification and wage theft. But that was because the district is also considered a state. Here in the city of Atlanta and in the state of Georgia, that authority rests with the Department of Labor. And so our limits are that we can educate all of those partners that Ms. Embry highlighted and ensure that we bring those things to the forefront. But we are not, and I just want to make sure we stress that because labor is in our title, is that we cannot truly enforce. But what we can do is refer, educate, and teach people how to be responsive while also leveraging our state relationships to put pressure on them to deliver.
So we would actually, that's great to know. So we would actually need the state to help us with enforcement. We can't specifically do it, but we can let them know the
That's right.
individuals and party, like bad actors that might not be. Okay, understood. That's great to know. And so if I ever have a situation like that where I believe that's happening with a contractor, I'll make sure to forward it to you to see if we can do that. So thank you for that. And I was also saying, I also wanted to ask about if this office would be able to start looking into the idea of city employee housing. All right, because
I
Sorry.
apologize, I didn't hear that last part.
if we would be able to utilize this department to start looking into the concept of city employee housing, just because, Atlanta's so interesting because this culture of my family, my aunt was an E901 operator, my dad worked on the back of a trash truck, my mother was in Watershed, in that continuation of that family, because they've lived in Atlanta and they take pride in the city, and so they work here, and a lot of our folks are having to commute. I would imagine that we would see much higher, rates of retention if this was something we were able to explore as part of our affordable housing plan. And wondering if we've all talked about it, but now it seems like we might have a central department to.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that information it'll teeter two areas. So one, I think when it comes to some of the think tank policy and activities related to that, it would be under Mr. English's shop because they oversee a lot of those activities. But some of the holistic data and performance and activities, that's what that new Ripple system that we were talking about that connects the dots. I do think that this organization could be a resource for that, but I probably wouldn't make it the central repository. It would still have to overlap those two service areas.
Understood, and thank you for that. But if I could make a specific ask, if there's a way that this office could recommend to us the way we could cut down on costs in some of our workforce's lives, and so we can cut down on that as part of a working benefit, to find out how maybe we can't, because a city employee housing project, that's going to take years. But maybe there's other things we can do in the interim to cut down, whether it's something with vouchers of some kind, or for food, for gas, whatever it may be, or something with,
Yeah, our supportive services actually, the WIOA funded supportive services could actually be utilized for some of those things. Now, again, that program, only about $3.2 million in the annual allocation, but it's something that what we should do on that is for us to look at, with the current budget and the resources available, whether we might be able to pilot something to be able to review and test and then come back. But I would also say that the organization doesn't have that capacity yet. We have the Ripple system right now just focused on the summer youth employment program.
Got it.
They'll actually augment it, and don't quote me on this time frame, but I believe it's between August and November, and then they'll also connect it to the state system once we get past January. So it's iterations for us to be able to build it, because again, it's really a state system that they're allowing us to have access to locally. So something that I think we can put in the pipeline, but it will take a little bit of work for us to get there.
Understood. And I'm deeply appreciative of that answer and looking forward to seeing how, again, I just want to help with everything, don't I? But how we can continue to be helpful with that. And I also would like to say that I know that there's, we're trying to do more internships for our youth. As we get partners in our districts that are wanting to offer that, would you like all of us to route those resources to you all?
Yes, so it's actually Ms. Teresa Austin Gibbons. We actually, we're stealing people from all around, all the subject matter experts. We stole her from CEO Thurman's shop over in DeKalb, and so she's leading that effort for us now. So she would be the point of contact. Our funds, and I think we're going to allocate some additional funding for this summer, but we're really kind of at our cap for this summer.
Got it.
But those who are interested, we plan to launch a year-round and then, of course, continue and expand SYP annually. So sending them now does not hurt anything because as soon as this 6-week program is over, we move into the next.
Awesome, thank you. Again, like, that concludes all of my questions, but very, very grateful that this department is up and running, and really looking forward to seeing the impact that you all will have and how we can help expand that impact. Thank you.
All right, I don't have any questions. I just want to clarify for everybody to Councilmember Shook's question. The WIOA funds, I just want to be able to say WIOA, flow through under the grant funds in the budget book, and it's on page 566. There's going to be a correction to this that right now it has it flowing through the City Planning Department, and it'll obviously now be flowing through the Department of Labor. The comment I'll make is obviously there's a lot of interest in this initiative and the upcoming opportunities. Next year, Ms. Lindo, we need to make sure that we budget more time for them. I think we thought because y'all were brand new, we wouldn't have a lot of conversations, but obviously there's been some rich discussion about the importance of this, and then appreciate just the fleshing out of the initiatives, the priorities, and the opportunities going forward in FY24. Really looking forward to seeing the short-term and long-term impact that this will have for our great city. All right, so with that, that concludes your presentation. We will quickly reset the room. Thank you to the HR staff I see in the room for being patient. We're going to get that going as soon as we can get y'all up here and ready to go. Again, colleagues, if you do not have your personnel action binder in front of you, let Ms. Lindo know and she can get you a copy. And then in full disclosure, as they're coming up, I've got a 4 o'clock meeting I'm going to step out for. Councilmember Shook will preside over the proceedings until I can get back at that point. So is Commissioner Smith on there? All right, is Commissioner, there she is. I see. Okay.
Yes. That's the code.
right, Commissioner, we are ready when you are. This is the final hearing, but it's the most important one, quite frankly, because it is about the people that are going to be impacted by our budget, and hopefully, and this kind of brings everything together. And so I turn the floor over to you to walk us through your presentation and the personnel paper.
No pressure.
Way to begin. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and to the rest of the council. Thank you all for having us here today to discuss the personnel paper, our real-time document. For those in the audience, the personnel paper is basically a discussion that we have and present to the council about personnel transactions that take place throughout the city, and there will be some words or terminology that we use. If there are any questions that comes from the council, we're willing to answer those. But at the beginning of the personnel paper, the slide, you see all of the terminology that we'll be using going forward. Because we have several departments and many of the transactions are related in each department, I just want to go through a list of what will be discussed by department. And some of the reasons that we have the personnel paper and the transactions that we'll speak to, the rationale behind it relates to career progression, rewarding employees, retaining high and achieving employees, retention and attracting in terms of recruitment, and also repurposing existing vacancies to address reorganizations within the various departments throughout the city, to address new business models and work streams, and to abolish positions or classifications that are now obsolete, since we did our position control at the beginning of the year in anticipation of moving forward with our classification and compensation study. So if you hear some of the same terminology by department, that's why. For City Council, no personnel actions to date. And before the official adoption of the budget, I do believe that there's an opportunity to come with final concerns, because this is a living document. For those who don't know, there are changes on a daily basis with the way that personnel moves. So what we have today, what we have at 3 o'clock may be different at 3:30. So it is a living document, and there are some pending actions that have been discussed with various members of the organization that may still come forward before the adoption of the final budget. ATL-DOT, a total of 105 personnel actions that are listed above. Position creations for the newly created engineering division. Position transfers that are intended to reallocate resources in the most efficient way to support specific business services, to include solid waste billing, financial operations, inventory delivery, and management. Reclassification of positions to support the increase in workload.
Okay, can I interrupt for just 1 second? Procedurally, I just want to say what we are going to do is, as we go through each department, we're going to stop and ask questions along the way rather than waiting until the end. So if you would, just when you get to the end, we'll see if there are any questions. If not, we'll move on to the next department.
Okay.
So with that, Department of Transportation, were you going to say anything else about transportation?
No, I'll wait.
Any questions or comments about this? And again, it's page 4 of the binder. Councilmember Hillis, and then Shook. Yep.
On the ATL-DOT slide, number 1, what does this have to do with solid waste? What does ATL-DOT have to do with solid waste billing?
Like right-of-way management, perhaps? Is that so that they can bill? Is that,
I didn't hear
is that a finance question?
I didn't hear the question. You're asking about how it had anything to do with the solid waste fund?
What's that?
That is just the information that's been provided to us from the departments, and so that's one of the reasons that they provided. So I believe we do have somebody in the audience that can better answer your question.
Okay, and then you can go to the podium. The microphone is live.
Generally is under DPW, but
It is, but there are interrelations between several of the different departments, and you also have sometimes where the employees are split funded and the services operationally integrate with one another. So sometimes some of the services are not specifically related to, like HR, we touch every single department in the city. So there are some things that are specifically related, or some of our positions that are split funded, where we go from department to department, or some of that operation may sit within a department that's not necessarily named, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Council. Deputy Commissioner Keith Robinson for the Department of Public Works. That's probably an error because there's no solid waste billing as it relates to ADOT. So it might be a bullet list that might be on the
Yeah, that was
slide.
my thought since we did the fix last year. I mean, all the solid
Yeah,
waste.
the fix
billing
last year, and then, there's a separation from
part of-
ADOT and DPD, and there's no financial part as it relates to ADOT.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
And then, that's the only question I have for now. Councilmember Juan, thank you.
I have a question about this. Any of the actions, I see that there are 10 employee salary adjustment actions. Are those specifically to address, we've talked a lot about hiring, retention. Are most of if there are salary adjustments, is that typically the strategy or where we're going to see that across departments?
Yes, there's a possibility. With various departments, you will see different reasons for the different transactions. We've asked some of the departments to come forward today to speak to those specific transactions because they're real-time documents, and some of these we've received as late as yesterday or today. So we would have the departments come forward to speak to the ones specifically that we cannot address. And for each one of these slides that are being presented, we have asked the department to provide us with the information because we know that it is compiled in Human Resources, but we asked the department to speak to the specific ones that we haven't been directly involved or that just came up within the last few days.
And there is a process that y'all do in terms of vetting and making sure that the justification for any sort of salary adjustments is valid and justified.
Yes, we still go through the RTF process.
Okay. This is more of a follow-up data point, and we may have several of these as we go through some of the departments that we've been particularly focused on in terms of recruitment and retention, this being one of them. So to the extent whoever's here to support the DOT request on this, if there are specific actions that are primarily to address retention and recruitment, that would be helpful just to point out a list for us between now and Finance Executive next Wednesday.
Okay.
Councilmember Hillis.
Yeah, so to kind of reiterate Chairman Juan's point, what actions within ATO DOT help to address really the emergent situation they have with staffing? Because I totally understand we have this pay in class study and it's going to come out, but we have these one-offs as we talked about in the previous presentation this morning, like we did with planning. But we have departments, DOT being one of them, where emergencies exist, in my humble opinion, where we don't have the staffing to do what they need to do. I mean, most of us found out via a news article that there are only 4 people repairing potholes in the city. Even during the early stages of the pandemic, I could get a pothole filled in the SLA 5 days. I've had potholes painted in my district for months now that haven't been repaired. So what raises that are focused on retention and recruitment within DOT are happening to address those issues? And you can answer that. I know we have Commissioner Cavanis out and Deputy Commissioner Smith, so y'all can split it. One can take it all.
Yes.
What is happening in DOT to address this?
I can defer to Mr. Cavanis, Commissioner Cavanis, but I can tell you that as we speak to each department, as they raise mission-critical position issues, we try to address those immediately. And even though the classification and compensation study is underway, there are, I guess, adjustments being made along the way, and that's almost on a daily basis as those items are being brought forward. And right now, Commissioner Cavanis and I are in ongoing discussions about that very issue. We've had a few meetings, and there are still meetings scheduled for the future, immediate future.
That's great to hear on that part. Commissioner.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Solomon Cavanis, ATL DOT. So this is an ongoing conversation that we've been working internally with the administration, focused on whole of government. We're working with other commissioners throughout the organization to think about our roles and what duties we take on in ATL DOT versus Public Works, and right-sizing our staff. There's an analysis associated with that, working with Deputy Commissioner Smith to make sure that analysis is shared and coordinated with Human Resources. So we are Also looking at our business processes relative to our capital program, and a lot of those positions are either split funded or full funded through our capital overhead budget. And whatever, from a state of good repair standpoint, you mentioned potholes and sidewalks, et cetera, we're going to try to pull some of those state of good repair issues out of the maintenance and use capital dollars to focus on that. And however we can right-size our staff to assist and support that, we're going to take advantage of that opportunity. And again, Commissioner Smith mentioned all the work we're doing with DC Roberts and herself around thinking about reclassifications, making sure that salaries are in line, but take a smart strategic approach to our right-sizing of the department.
So just to, I use one example, and I know you, Commissioner, and you're working with Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Wiggins, and the administrative team to fix this department, which you were handed to do, and are doing a good job of doing that. It's going to take some time, but specifically to the maintenance needs. And I know there are discussions whether some stuff goes to DPW, et cetera, but in the current personnel paper, is there anything in this paper that's going to help you increase the salaries? Again, just using that one example because it's high on my radar. Ideally, we get more resurfacing dollars to fix those streets that have potholes, but you know, in the interim, we've got to get those potholes filled a lot closer to those five-day SLAs than I'm currently seeing months to take to fill. So is there anything in the current paper that allows you to increase those salaries for retention and recruitment efforts to help? And, you know, as one example, the pothole posse, that it has been named.
So short answer, yes. By way of that realigning of our capital dollars against the general fund and I guess our strategic business approach, I'll use an example. If you think about our sidewalk work, we have thereabouts 11 personnel focused on concrete and sidewalk. If we use our capital dollars to focus on sidewalk improvements, then we can repurpose some of those duties and some of those funds by way of training and thinking about right-sizing. There are many examples, including signalization and other assets and appurtenances that we can take advantage of to do just that. So.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith.
Before I move to Councilmember Lewis with a question, I guess it goes back. So yeah, I'm going to assume that the employee salary adjustment, reclassification with incumbent and reclassification without incumbent, and salary grade amendments are likely going to be the four biggest categories that are going to be around recruitment and retention, right?
Yes, and equity adjustments.
Yeah, but that's the rationale for one of these actions. It's not actually, equity adjustment isn't actually an action, right? Because I don't see it as one of the boxes that would have a number.
Oh, no, it's not going to be there. That's something that we look at from a global HR standpoint.
Is a ration. I gotcha.
Yes.
And so I guess going back to the request by next Wednesday, it would be helpful to kind of pull those out and you know, specifically back to Councilmember Hillis's, help us make the connection of, hey, we're making these 50 actions, it's roughly 50 actions, and you know, it's going to be to help with some of the SLAs that we're looking at. Because that's kind of how I think we're approaching this, is that this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of addressing the vacancies that are across some of the critical functions and departments that we're seeing. So, all right, Councilmember Lewis.
I want to say I appreciate you, but also I understand that how important the mayor takes the transportation department. With you being one of the hires that he took his time to actually get, when I see this happen, that means that this was something that should have been fixed. And so I trust the mayor and I trust this department. I trust him wanting to see that department be very successful. And so I stand wholeheartedly with any decision that the engineers make about the transportation department, because all them engineers.
And if I may react to that, we're not all engineers in Atlanta DOT. We have some really talented analysts in HR and financial folks, but I appreciate that confidence around engineering folks. Appreciate it.
All right, other questions for ADOT, the actions on ADOT? All right, wow. So I got some good ground rules in terms of how we're going to approach this, but let's keep going.
Okay, the next department is AIM, Atlanta Information Management, and we do have a representative from AIM here today. I believe Commissioner Sankey, Chief Sankey is here. Before I move forward. Was here. Okay. The total personnel transactions for Atlanta Information Management for the proposed is funding allocation to, the total number, I'm sorry, is 29. And when I give the justification, some of this has come from the departments, but we've also had discussions with some of the departments about why we're moving forward with the particular transactions. And some of them that are real-time probably don't have the justification, and we have asked the departments to come forward. So funding allocation to align employees more appropriately, reclassification with incumbents due to increased responsibilities that align with the department's needs, reclassification without incumbents due to different skill sets needed, which will focus on service delivery and customer engagement processes and satisfaction. And with that, we all understand, and we've had discussions about the technology component and what's needed in the city, and having the inability with the current, I guess, salary structure to recruit the proper talent. So we've had several discussions and meetings with the AIM department regarding some of these transactions, and some of the recommendations are coming straight from the chief himself regarding his budget and the needs that he has for his department.
All right, questions for around AIM personnel actions? Okay.
Audit, no personnel actions.
Any questions? No, okay, sorry. I'm kidding. Keep going. I was just saying, any questions on the no action?
Okay. Department of Aviation, if there's a representative for it, can you please come forward? Department of Aviation has 148 transactions. We do know how large our airport is. They have 3 justifications for the request that they've made. Position transfer to alignment, to align resources to the appropriate funding and organizational structures for each business unit. Reclassification with incumbent to adjust priorities and job scope changes. This offers career progression options and the ability to reward and retain high-achieving employees. Reclassification without incumbent to repurpose existing vacancies to address reorganization, new demands, and work streams. Again, with the mayor rounding out all of his entire cabinet, there are several departments that are moving forward with reorganization and looking at the talent that they have available and the talent that they're trying to retain. So there's several different transactions that relate to those different movements within the department.
All right, questions for aviation? All right, we'll keep going.
Next department is Citizens Review Board. No personnel actions.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Broaders. Next department is City Planning. City Planning has a total of 62 personnel actions and 3 justifications. Above entry of classification for permit technicians due to the difficulty in attracting and retaining qualified candidates. Position creations for the neighborhood planning units, the MPUs, due to expanded responsibilities and new departmental initiatives. And reclassification with and without to better align with the current and future duties performed related to the MPU program and Office of Buildings' increased permitting workload. We do know that we did have and if anyone is a representative here from City Planning, if you can please come forward. Part of City Planning's reorg and change in operation was related to some of the things that we introduced to you earlier this year with the academy. So there were some changes in that particular area as it related to the permit and permitting process, and we were able to make some personnel changes there that impacted operations in a favorable way and a new way of doing business. So I'm not sure if we have any questions for.
All right, questions on city planning. I guess I will ask, I'm a little surprised. I thought that was hoping I'd see a little more actions here that would, because of the vacancy conversation that we just had earlier today. And even as I'm looking at the above entry classification and position and some of the classifications or the salary grade amendment, I'm not seeing the volume I would have expected. And so I don't know if maybe you can walk me through how these actions will help address the recruitment retention issue. Because on the surface, in terms of the counts and the categories, it's not intuitive to me right off the bat.
Sure thing. Janet E. Sutterfall, Deputy Commissioner, Department of City Planning. The above entry classifications and the above entry positions, as well as the reclasses with and without incumbents, are intended to do just that, to align responsibilities and salaries with the restructured roles that we perceive we'll be having as a result of the building permit improvements in the Office of Buildings, for example. In our NPU area, we have reclassified some of the staff were improperly classified as urban planners. They do not fulfill that role. Same thing in our marketing and communications area. As far as creations of classifications, there too, this was an opportunity to promote and acknowledge the good work of certain staff.
Okay.
So they've been reclassified to higher positions. And then in terms of position creation, we're looking to create 23 new positions. Most of those will be in the Office of Buildings and in our zoning area, where we consider those to be very mission critical. The others will be dispersed amongst our three other offices, the Office of Commissioner, Design, and Housing.
How do we feel about the creation positions in terms of compensation range and grade and all that? I would hate for us to create it and then grind for 6 months and not be able to hire and recruit because of not thinking through of that in advance.
Through the chair, Councilman Lunt, I wanted to address that because we do have a classification and compensation director. We've been in talks with planning probably since January or February
That's
regarding
correct.
realignment of all these positions. And beyond the classification and compensation study, we have the classification and compensation director who actually looks at these positions and does the benchmarking in advance before these transactions take place.
Great, so that homework has kind of been done. Even,
Yes.
It feeds into this, and it won't necessarily need to be a two-step action where we create it and then have to come back 6 months later and go, oh, we missed the mark.
Right.
We still might, but at least we feel good about this.
Right, and to that end, the Director of Class and Comp is actually in communications constantly with Evergreen, because if we're making any of those changes, we're making sure that it's real time, so we don't readdress it, 6 months later, like you're saying, because we've already addressed it, and it saves time for us.
That's great. That's exactly what I want to hear. I think, this is another one of those departments that you've heard a lot of interest in terms of shrinking that vacancy down because of how critical the functionality is. Other questions or comments on city planning? I know we just heard from them earlier today, but this was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's keep going.
Thank you, Ms. Sitterfall. Next department is Department of Corrections. If you have a representative, please come forward. The Department of Corrections has a total of 3 personnel actions for position creations to support day-to-day facility operations, which involves restructuring, organizing, and realigning the current organization. And before we get into that, we also know that we are currently engaging in the class and comp for public safety for corrections as well. So some of the changes will be addressed there. Thank you.
Questions on corrections? Okay.
Thank you. Forward.
Yeah, we can go on. Yeah, sorry.
Next department is ATL 311, Customer Service. We have a total of 4 personnel transactions, position creations and reclassification without incumbent to support the increase in workload and allocate resources in the most effective way to maintain safety, security, and efficiency while increasing productivity. I will confess that I have not had the time to sit down with the newly appointed director, even though I am familiar with Commissioner Good. We will have conversations moving forward about what her departmental needs are, because we've had some conversations about E911 and how it intersects with 311 and what we can do to improve operational issues.
Does anyone have questions about the customer service 311? Councilmember Bakhtiari and then Hillis.
Councilmember Hillis, do you want to go first? Because I'm a little bit more long-winded than you. You good? Oh, okay. Yeah, so just wanted to ask the question for Commissioner Good. I mean, I have a question about the budgeting structure for the department. Where do you have, where did you?
That was
never mind.
Howard's. It's Howard's.
Okay. Y'all are the worst. A question of this is around the budgeting structure currently for 311, because we have repeatedly asked, stop, we have repeatedly asked about getting them to 24/7 because of PAD, and also just having a closed loop system. And I know that right now, Commissioner Good, I want to say that I can't remember which departments operate on a different system. Is it DPW and, no?
Code enforcement.
It's code enforcement, thank you. You've told me that 20 million times, and I keep forgetting. So certain, also the helping them, and I know that they're getting ready to launch a few things, but I don't believe you all might have a set budget, but I think you also take from some of the departments, and I was curious because if they're going to be taking the transferring of low-lying offenses to try to free up our officers to be able to focus on violent crime, if also a portion of APD's budget or an E91's budget is also going to go into 311's budget, in addition to some of the other departments that pay in because of the work they also do for that department. Does that make sense?
It does, with the guidance of finance, letting us know what we can do with those budgets and how they intersect with one another.
Yeah, I suppose, and I can ask them more about that. I suppose my question, though, is because for the employees that are doing that work, in order to retain them and give them more benefits and allow them to stay and continue making these calls, how do we get them to a closed loop system and to being 24/7? And whether that's a question for you or more for finance, I don't know. But
So we are working closely with the administration. So the goal is to eventually go 24/7 if it's feasible, but it would not be into 2025. But that's when the diversion center will be open so that we can be able to provide that 24-hour service. However, we are able to activate as needed, and we are working closely with PAD to see if there are some other ways that we can provide accessibility to PAD services after 7 p.m. So we are working with the administration on those areas. As far as the closing the loop, the system, what we've done is we put into the system an SLA metric. So when SLAs are getting close to meeting the deadline, departments are now getting updated via the system. Also, we have a team, an escalation team that works closely with departments to ensure that we are updating the customers, especially those that are escalated to us. But we are in the process of getting an RFP. Well, RFP is in place, so we are working with DOP to ensure that we get a CRM. But once that CRM vendor is selected, it would take probably up to 6 months to a year before it rolls out.
thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
All you, Councilmember Hillis.
Councilmember Hillis.
Thank you, Chairman Wan. Thank you, Commissioner Good. Not a whole lot of actions here, but I know we continue to have issues with staffing up your department. Seems almost every Monday there's a social media post that goes out that y'all have high call volumes. People have, very long extended wait times. So is there a conversation ongoing about staffing up 311 so we get those wait times down and aren't having to push those notices out to people?
So call volumes will continue to exist. So Mondays are our highest call volumes since the inception of 311, and always after a holiday. So that will always exist. However, we are at a place where we do not have long wait times. We haven't had a long wait time in a while. So when I did share our metric in think it was April, it showed to where we're holding at 25 seconds, so when someone calls in, their call is answered fairly quickly. It may be what you're thinking is when a call may be transferred to DWM, when we do a code transfer, it may be a hold time between those two, but when a customer calls into 311, it's not a hold time. As far as staffing, we have staffed up to, we looked at our workforce management, we referred to our workforce management team, and they advise us weekly on our resources. And currently, we are holding at 42 agents for the call center and 5 agents for PAD. And so they are able to answer the calls and without a hold time at all. So we're doing fairly good, and our service levels are staying above 90% most days.
So what is your, obviously Monday would be your highest call volume since, you closed over the weekend, but what are the wait times, on Mondays? How do they vary from the other days?
Yeah, when I looked at it this Monday, it was about the same, it was averaging the same, so it was not bad at all. So I will continue to look, but I have not noticed any long wait times.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, before I call on Councilmember Lewis, I just want to remind everybody, I'd like just for us to focus on the personnel actions in this paper. I think we could talk about staffing, vacancy issues, and strategies there, but let's try not to get too much into the operational stuff because we do have this whole book to get through. And but Councilmember Lewis, you have the floor.
And strictly on staffing, how many, I'm trying to go through, how many people do you have currently working in 301 call center? And how many people are we short?
Well, we're not short in the call center. So we have 42 agents, which is suffice for the volume. We have 6 supervisors, 6 team leads, and we have 3 individuals on workforce management. We just hired our call center director, made an offer today, so we're excited about that. So we're doing fairly good in the call center.
How many open jobs?
So department-wide,
In the call center?
maybe
0?
maybe 1, but it's not maybe 1 or 2, but it's not a lot open. So we do have the capacity to go up to 66 is what we're budgeted for, but at this moment we're holding pretty steady with what we have, and so as we see a need to increase, we will continue to increase over time. But right now we're doing fairly well.
So I count 24 open positions. You said the opportunity to go at 66 people in a call center?
We can budget up to 66.
And we currently we already have budgeted up there, or we can?
We can budget up to 66.
So I think we're having a high call volume issue in the city of Atlanta. I think the best way to fix that is to bring in more bodies, especially if we can get up to 66 people.
Yeah.
I know I've had job fairs where I know people. I got a text this morning just about 311 about two different people that said that they've applied for this position months in and months out. We see it's open, and now I just found out there's an opportunity to hire 24 more people. I would like to know if there's a way we can get those 24 more people, because call volume, the call time, wait time is getting. I call myself actually, and I have my staff members call. I call so much for pad issues that I know that wait time myself. And then I always end up hanging up and calling Moki on her cell phone. And so my hope is that we can increase that we can get those 24 bodies in the stable. I mean, not in the stable, in the house. Get those 24 bodies in the house, and we can actually hire those folks.
So we had a hiring freeze, so now we're out of the hiring freeze. So as I think I mentioned in April, we're going to start hiring for agents June and July, so we could start the new year off, stronger. But right now we are doing fairly well. I would check PAD hold time, but PAD hold times are different from ATL 311 because PAD, you have to take your time with the customer because of the need. So those call times will vary. But in the call center, it's different to where we're seeing that they are meeting their call metric each time.
When was the hiring freeze? When did it start?
It probably started right at the beginning of the year, and then in about maybe a month or so ago, we were told we can hire again.
So we've had a hiring freeze in 311 from January until
About a month.
June, and
about
we've
a
been
month
having
ago.
job fairs telling people about these jobs. So when I know I talked to you and I said folks told me that they're applying for jobs that don't really exist, and I didn't know how to explain it. But that's what we're talking about. So how can we fix, or how can we remove those jobs from online if we aren't trying to fill them right now? Can you help me? Someone help me right now?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna ask that we take this offline again,
Okay.
because we have like 30 more departments to go through, and it's already 4 o'clock. All that said, it's important, and I think if you can take that all
Yes,
offline with Councilmember
we will follow
Lewis. Anything else on the personnel actions for 311? All 4 of them, yeah.
You're right, but
Okay,
feel free to call me anytime. If you all have call handle times or issues, please just reach out and call me. I'm available 24 hours a day. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to hand this off to Vice Chair Shook, and then I'll be back after my call. So next up is Enterprise Asset Management.
Okay. Next department is Enterprise Asset Management with a total of 7 personnel actions. If your representative is here, please come forward. Departmental rep. The transactions for DEEM, as we know it, are position creations to support the commissioner and the day-to-day operations, position transfers to move the appropriate organization, reclass with and without incumbent to correct employees who are filled and out of class.
Okay, any questions about any of these 7 proposed personnel transactions? Okay, seeing none, let's mush on.
Okay. Next department is Ethics, with a total of 7 transactions. If you have a departmental representative, please come forward. Transactions in the Department of Ethics are position creations due to increased workload and responsibilities, salary grade amendments to better align resources and additional duties to meet the critical needs of the office.
Questions? Please continue.
Executive offices, next department, a total of 39 transactions. There's a representative, please come forward. Position creations to align incumbents in the appropriate authorized positions, position transfers to align positions to the appropriate cost center, reclassification with and without incumbent to restructure and to align current and future resources.
Go ahead, Ms. McDermott.
Thank you. For the 15 position transfers, can you elaborate on where those 15 people are being taken from and where they're being put within executive offices?
1 second. Is that the
Yes, for it.
This may be some of the real-time transactions that I mentioned to you that we just received. So there are some that we will not be able to address immediately today because the information was provided to us probably within the last 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
If that is the case, I'd rather not speak on it and ask or have more time and come back to the council.
Okay, so do we say all 15, we still don't know where all those are transfers that are happening in real time as of right now?
Well, when we say executive offices, all the mayor's offices, so I would have to know exactly which one it is out of the 36.
I swear, Commissioner, I'll get better at these questions, don't you worry. Okay, so would that be something you'd be able to get back to us on? I just
Absolutely.
wanting to understand, because obviously understanding that the mayor's office is large and needs additional assistance, my concern is if they're being taken from understaffed positions or understaffed offices and how we're backfilling those positions. And so we can get into that more off.
I think you'll see that a lot of it is the realignment. I'm sorry. A lot of it is the realignment with the creation of like the new policy division they had under that as well. A lot of those being moved right size from where they were to that position.
It's just something I would like to better understand, keep an eye on, because typically when new departments are created, it's not that they don't tend to get smaller. And so just having an understanding of what is occurring there so that we don't lose complete sight. And next thing you know, next year, it's an increase of over 60 to 70%, while some of our other departments are still facing backlogs and unfilled positions or positions that haven't gone without raises for extended periods of time. That's something I would like to keep a better eye on. That's all.
Understood.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next department is finance, with a total of 36 personnel transactions. Oh, I'm sorry. That was it for finance? Okay. Position creations due
I'll
to,
tell you when you can stop.
okay. Position creations due to additional responsibilities, funding allocations to align positions to the appropriate cost centers, reclassifications with and without incumbent aligned positions with current job duties and responsibilities, and salary grade amendments for pay equity.
Do we know how many positions that takes us to within finance with the 8 new creation, the 8 new positions?
One more time.
Do we happen to know how many positions that takes us to in finance with the 8 new? How many people or how many employees are now within finance with these new creation, with the new creation of
The
positions?
total number of employees in the department?
In finance department, yes.
Okay. I have to pull it out. We're going to pull it out.
Takes us to, it should be 163 with
Yeah,
the 155 plus the 8 creations.
Say that again?
It'd be 163 once we have the 8 creations.
163 once we include the 8 positions?
Yes.
Dr. Wilson, thank you.
The next department is fire rescue, AFRD, with a total of 138 transactions. If you have a representative here, please come forward. For fire rescue, justifications are abolishing positions duplicated from the previous personnel paper, position creations to appropriately align resources, employee salary adjustments to enhance service quality to the internal and external stakeholders, reclassification with and without incumbent due to changes in priorities, salary grade amendments to have cohesive operations from shift to shift and to be more competitive.
Go ahead. Do you want to ask?
I'm recognizing that I'm going to get very annoying during this process, but I just have additional questions for fire and rescue. So the abolishment of 22 positions with the creation of 14, I obviously am not certain. I'm looking to see what the abolishment of the positions are. I'm asking, happy to see some of the reclassifications and the adjustments on salary, but I'm curious about the abolishment and also the creation when we know that you all are understaffed and need additional. I just wanted a bit of clarity around.
So the abolishment, again, good evening, everyone. James McLemore with Atlanta Fire. As regards to the abolishment of positions, those are actually duplicated from last year, so they're just being reduced down.
Understood. I just wanted clarity because I know how understaffed you all have been. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something we were missing.
Right, we already had them, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And just for, I guess, the public and for the council's edification, any abolishments, we've already socialized those with all of the departments to make sure that they're positions that are either obsolete or not operationally necessary anymore, or duplicates like Chief just mentioned.
Right. And I'll break in here with a kind of a follow-up question because maybe that'll sort of shed light on some things we're all wondering about, which is sort of the genesis, kind of the chicken or egg is kind of what starts the conversation that ends up with this personnel paper, because you're new, your system may be different. Do departments begin this conversation by coming to you with proposed transactions and then you scrub them, or is it the other way around, or is it a combination?
It is a combination of both. From the day that I started, we did the position control audit and found positions that were either obsolete, needed, operationally necessary. We've had conversations with the departments. We have conversations with finance to try to get to what's funded and unfunded. But yes, it either starts with HR by us doing, I don't want to say an audit, but a review of the department through our HRBP directors, or from the department initiating a conversation about their needs.
Okay, and there are a lot of transactions here, I take it, that stems at least in part from you having a sort of a fresh set of eyes and maybe some different nuances in terms of interpretations of who's supposed to be doing what.
Yes, and aside from that, any request for either reclassifications or whatever, we look at it from an operational standpoint to see, because some positions, whether they're sworn or civilian, we try to look across the organization and not just at the department, because there are some classifications that are duplicated throughout, and we don't want to do something in one department and create inequities in other departments.
Okay, so you and the operating departments collaborate, and do you kind of come up with your draft, and then who does that draft go to for you then to collaborate with out of the mayor's office?
We
Or
normally.
are you you're the last
Yeah,
stop?
it kind of stops with us, and if there's a
Okay.
concern, we normally do that in concert and having discussions with the CFO's office, because we want to make sure that there is funding, or if there's an impact, and make sure there's no budget override. So if there are any concerns with the impact of the change, then we would take it to leadership. I mean, but most of the decisions, the executive offices have allowed them to rest in human resources.
Okay, that's helpful.
Thank you, Chief. I think that's it. Next department is grants. If you have a representative, please come forward. There are a total of 18 personnel transactions for the grants department, and we have listed as justification position creations, position transfers, and reclassification with incumbents are due to reorganization within a department. This is another department that had a reorg and requested changes.
Okay. Any questions about the 18 grants transactions? Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Oh, next department is Human Resources. Representatives are at the table. We have a total of 36 transactions. Position creation for proper support for client groups, funding allocation realigns allocations based on current job duties, reclassification with and without incumbent due to change in priorities, salary grade amendments to align employee salaries.
Any questions? Please proceed.
Next department is Inspector General with a total of 6 transactions. If you have a representative, please come forward. Reclassification with incumbent due to the assignment of additional duties to the Independent Procurement Division to keep pace with the shift within the Department of Procurement.
Okay. Questions?
Just one quick question. I want to thank you for all the work you've done to really push for the work that you've done with the IG office. Thank you so much. Question for you. I know we were also working on getting you additional staff, and that you do a lot on a smaller budget. Do these the reclassifications and the of change of pay, does it compete with national standards?
That's tough. There's a lot of diversity within the Office of Inspector General community. You have some that are so very leanly staffed as to have an Office of the Inspector General that consists solely of the Inspector General. And then you have other offices with hundreds of investigators. So it's hard to make that call. There really is no one national standard. We're trying to grow this office slowly but surely. So this year, the focus was on retention and making sure we had the equity adjustments that would both keep and attract new candidates. And we're likely to try to grow a little bit more next fiscal year.
Understood. Well, then I will, tells me I need to have, do a better job of checking in. So we'll continue having conversations, seeing how I can be of assistance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next department is Judicial Agencies with a total of 10 transactions. Justification, class title amendment accurately reflects the level of responsibility and salary grade that comes with the role, and salary grade amendments to align level of quality that is expected in those roles. You have a representative, if you can please come forward.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you. Next department is Department of Labor. We just had the presentation from our Chief of Staff. Total of 13 transactions. The newly created Department of Labor is recommending personnel actions to allow proper department setup to meet the needs of the department. The department is requesting classification and position creations that will allow the department to function and begin accomplishing goals and objectives. Is there a representative? We just literally had
No,
that
and
discussion.
and we just went
a few
over
minutes ago.
all that. So I don't see any questions, but thank you. It's a brand-new department. Okay.
Thank you, Chief Jackson. Okay. The next department is Department of Law with a total of 12 transactions. Funding allocation to appropriate cost center split and reclassification of employees' classifications to align with their current job duties and responsibilities. There's a representative, if you can please come forward.
In terms of funding allocation issues requiring modifications, where do those recommendations tend to come from? The operating departments, or y'all, or finance, or a combination?
I can go ahead and speak. They usually come from the operating departments. They pretty much decide that based on the tasks that are given to the individual who's sitting in that position.
Okay. Anything else about the law transactions? Okay, seeing none.
Next department is Parks and Recreation with a total of 60 transactions, 3 justifications. Position creations due to increase in programs and park utilization. Position transfers to move positions to the appropriate organization. Reclass with and without incumbent due to additional responsibilities. Is there a representative?
And here's the commissioner. So let me ask, and I'm sorry if your presentation covered this and I just missed it, but 44 positions is a relatively high amount. So go ahead and put a little meat on that bone, would you, in terms of these creations?
Yeah, happy to. I think in previous years, some of these positions were considered unfunded, and so this is backfilling those positions that were unfunded and unfilled, as well as positions that were unfunded and filled. So these are technically positions being created in the new format, but historically would have been classified as such. So for instance, these are 2 positions to support the Moving Atlanta Forward bond program, park maintenance positions, rec center positions to provide hours on weekends, admin park support, consolidation of these positions from seasonal to full-time positions to provide better support for our park maintenance staff, 2 operation consultants, 1 for the recreation division to support continuous improvement, 1 for the park maintenance division to support continuous improvement, and the creation of a deputy commissioner and partnership and enterprise division to support golf, tennis, as well as partnerships, conservancies, and friends groups.
Mr. Hillis.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shook. Thank you, Commissioner Cutler. Also noticed the high number of creations and DPR. Is this only accounting for what's proposed in your fiscal year 24 budget? As I'm sure you know now that this body, sponsored by me, we just did the first adoption of a charter amendment, and as part of the budget process, we're going to be bringing $16 million new dollars to parks, with 11.2 of that going to long-delayed park maintenance. Would this amount of creative positions cover that, or will there be additional personnel adjustments coming once that is adopted?
Yeah, this is under the mayor's proposed budget, which includes a 6.5% increase for the Department of Parks and Recreation of roughly $2.8 million. These positions and other associated costs of personnel, professional services, that's what's included in this outline here that you see before you. The proposed legislation by City Council to increase the millage and the subsequent allocation to Parks and Recreation, that would be an addition. Likely you'd see that in the fiscal year first quarter personnel paper, or after we present to City Council after the 180-day timeline as set by the resolution.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Parks and Rec? Thank you. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Wood.
Question. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Let me ask a question. What can we do as far as funding positions where the seniors of Atlanta will have senior programming throughout Atlanta, like the one that presently stands at the old Adamsville Rec Center, where we have upwards to 200 people weekly? Is that something that you all have looked into? Because I know we pick up folks from all these various districts just to come to Old Adamsville because we're operating at a premium level. Have you looked at the funding of maybe 3 or 4 more folks like Ms. Jones? I know District 11, District 12, District 3, and District 4, and other districts could benefit from heavily senior programming.
Yes, we have looked at that, and as you know, Ms. Jones and several of our providers are contract employees, so they work on a 1099 basis, and so we use the procurement process to procure their services in addition to the staff that we have on our team. So we are looking at both opportunities where, one, we're contracting with providers to provide services not just at Old Adamsville, but at William Walker, C.T. Martin, Roselle Fan, Thomasville, and other locations, in addition to providing additional senior services through programs that we direct, both at Anthony Flanagan and other locations. So we are taking a comprehensive approach and looking to provide more for our older adults and our seniors. We recognize that there is a greater need, and so we're working to respond to that.
Yes, I definitely want, just like our mayor wants seniors to be a priority. Right now, the old Adamsville Rec Center seems to be where you have the bulk of the activities for the seniors, upwards to 150 to 200 people there. And I definitely would like to see that in other districts. Thank you.
We have senior activities all across the city of Atlanta, from Roselle
I'm talking
Fan,
about
Thomasville.
the number.
I understand, Councilmember.
I mean,
but
10, 20 people, you can't compare what goes on in other districts. So let's be fair to all of the districts. Let's put these senior programmings all over the city of Atlanta. You can't compare 50 people to what Ms. Jones has. Thank you.
And I've been over to see some of Ms. Jones' programs. So if there's a way, do we have contracted people like Ms. Jones at other centers?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so.
C.T. Martin, as well as Thomasville and other locations.
So what about in District? How do I get more? How can we put in our budget? Because none of those are in District 12. How can we put in our budget to where we can get some contracted people like Ms. Jones in District 12? And because we got an auditorium in Roselle Fan, we got, so how can we do that?
I
don't think that's a personnel question. I think that's
I think that the issues that you're raising, as well as the issues that Councilmember Boone are raising, is an offline discussion that we can have, because it sounds like it's an operational concern about staffing at the respective recreational centers. So I think we could probably get more into that discussion with the commissioner about that operation at that time, but I can't speak to that from here.
I'm talking about the staffing. I'm talking about the contract position like Ms. Jones has. I want a contract person like that. So Roselle Fan has potential to grow to 200 people per day. So I understand how that goes. How can we get that contract position?
Right. I understand what you're saying. I just don't think that we have enough information here to respond to that question, at least to give you an informed response regarding the operation, because we're talking about, that's a procurement piece maybe as well, or staffing from the HR perspective.
So, okay, I'm with that, but I would like to see it happen, because she's saying some of my folks are leaving District 12 to go over there, and they ain't even mad at me when they go over there. They say, Councilmember Lewis, we ain't mad at you. It's just more fun over here. Okay. And so.
I'll defer to the Commissioner for Parks for operational issues, but as far as the staffing relates, we can have a joint meeting to discuss it.
Good.
May I respond?
Yes.
I mean, so one budget is personnel, and that's what we're talking about today, which is personnel. The other budget is professional services, which is what pays contract employees. So those are separate discussions. So we're happy to talk with the council members about the senior programming and contract for services that would be paid out of the professional services budget, and then the personnel budget, there are kind of two pots of money that we can draw from to provide senior services. We are taking a comprehensive look at how we're delivering senior services in Atlanta, and we can provide an update at a later date at maybe a CDHS meeting.
Okay, well, and it's an important topic for a lot of us, and so I would take the commissioner up on his invitation to sit with anyone who has questions about it. Okay? Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Moon.
Let me say this, that we fully understand contract professional services as opposed to personnel, but we wanted to take this opportunity to let the public know that what goes on at Old Adamsville in District 10 should be duplicated all over this city. And we'll be happy to meet with you, but the public needs to know that their representatives know the difference, and we're going to take this opportunity to let the mayor, his staff, and everybody know that we expect to see what happens in District 10 happen all over this city. Seniors are a priority.
Thank you.
Okay, APD.
APD. Thank you, Commissioner. APD has a total of 125 transactions with justification. If there's a representative, please come forward. Above entry positions for essential positions below the grade of 16 that have been challenging to fill and retain. Position creations to address the increase in the day-to-day operations. Reclass with and without incumbent promotional programs for forensic technicians and latent print examiners and other operational needs.
Okay, and I know we're going to want to hear more about two of these buckets, so let's start with above entry, 65. So can you tell us a little bit about what justifies this, and who are we talking about here?
Yolanda Pascal, APD Budget Management Chief. Councilmember, to answer your question, the above entry starts with all positions, including code enforcement, latent print, which falls under our crime lab, the warehouse, some of the more administrative roles, and trying to fill those critical areas. So it also includes our GCIC techs and trying to do above entry. As of right now, what happens is that what is advertised is the minimum salary, and we found that challenging to fill those positions. And so in order to address those issues for those employees who are currently here, as well as the positions that we need to fill, we're requesting for above entry so that we don't have to do the minimum.
Okay, so it's a competition issue.
Yes.
And is this kind of part of the whole reality we now have where all these police departments are competing and cannibalizing each other, and this is just a component of that?
It is. So we've worked with the compensation director in order to look at some of the positions, both those that have been expressed as points of importance by various council members as well as the department. So this is our attempt to address some of those issues.
Okay, and I know there's others have questions, but my other question is, same question, can you please give us a little more detail about the 32 position creations?
So the 32 position creations are from areas such as public affairs, our program management team, which manages all of the various facilities that police have, administrative operations such as logistics supports, warehouse and records management, an administrative person for crime lab for entry of the evidence that is coming in, code enforcement in order to support the various areas, both the interim process and the day-to-day operations, background and recruitment to aid in some of the marketing for them. We've also included the creation of a fitness director for the training academy to both help those new recruits as well as current employees to maintain their health and stay physically fit.
Okay, good. Yeah, we got Bakhtiari and then Hillis.
Myself off. Thank you so much. I have a question, a follow-up question on code enforcement.
Okay.
So we have 7 code enforcement officers, I believe, for the entire city. And I believe, are we still funded for 21?
We are, as well as the administration provided additional funding for 3 additional positions.
So up to 20, so up to 24?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And so with, I believe the national average sits around, I want to say around 50,000 for a code enforcement officer. Are we going to be raising those officer salaries to that amount in this paper?
We are.
And does that include also pay raises for people in supervising roles so that we're having even distributions of pay raises across the board?
It does, as well as those who are tied to the operations of code enforcement, but who are not in those code enforcement officer titles.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that, as I'm certain Director Talley is.
Yes.
And we're all very glad to hear that because of, I know that you all were losing code enforcement officers to other departments because of their pay being higher.
Correct.
Would you mind, I don't know if this is the time for this question, so maybe I can request that you send me this information, just a breakdown of those positions and what the pay is so I don't accidentally submit a budget amendment for something that's already been allocated for?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
As a follow-up to Ms. Pascal's presentation, we being HR and Classification Compensation Director in the last 2 weeks, met at least 4 or 5 times with police as well as code enforcement and some other units within the police department regarding support services, because the concern was if we have officers out there arresting, we don't have anyone to actually follow up with the support that's needed to prosecute. So we looked at that globally. When code enforcement came forward with concerns, we looked at the other support services and across the board. That's what Ms. Pascal is speaking to, having met with the classification and compensation director. So there were range changes, promotions, realignments, several things that took place in that space. So the one with code enforcement, it also trickled down to like 3 or 4 other areas, Ms. Pascal?
Correct.
Yes, so we looked at several different disciplines and realigned them to be in the space where we are competitive and not being cannibalized by neighboring departments.
Yes, that's fantastic to hear, because I also know that part of your process, people would apply for positions, but we weren't listing the salaries right away, so they'd find out halfway through and then drop out. So it was great that we were getting reports of all these people that were applying, but you know, this is not on you all, but we did not do a good job of following up to find out, did those people stay through the application process? And the answer 95% of the time is no. So I'm very glad to hear that, because obviously the less employees we have, the more responsibility we're placing on individuals who should not be doing that work. So I'm really glad to hear that that those adjustments are being made, and looking forward to seeing, Ms. Pascal, the report on that, so that I don't accidentally duplicate efforts.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much to my colleagues' questions, first go to code enforcement. So obviously a large need there. I think there's approaching or exceeding 70+% vacancy with those code enforcement inspectors. So in the book here, I see the director, the deputy director, and one supervisor position, but where are the actual code enforcement inspectors adjustments reflected?
So we already have authorization for above entry for the code enforcement officer. As Commissioner Smith stated, it's just a matter of adjusting those salaries based on the analysis that was done. So it did not require to be added into this paper, but they will be affected as well.
Okay, like Councilmember Bakhtiari requested, if you could send that information to me, that
Yes.
further details all of the adjustments within the code enforcement section. Next question is, I know the most significant number of above entry position adjustments are with customer service representative. What does such a person do in APD with that title?
So they are located in a multitude of different units. It's everything from the interaction at the windows in property to you have customer service representatives in code enforcement. So based on where they are assigned determines kind of what their job functions are, but that is the classification that they are under. So while we were making adjustments to code enforcement, we didn't want to leave any one group out, and so we looked at all of them as a whole.
Next question is, I know one of the priorities that the chief presented in his budget presentation was revamping and getting our crime lab back up to spec so we can actually process evidence and not rely on the GBI, which takes, way too long and throws out all but one drug and tests it. And I see some like scattered in here with forensic technicians and stuff, but is there truly enough in this budget book to address what the chief presented that he wanted to do with the crime lab?
So there is. However, we are working still to develop additional classifications. So one of the requirements is that in order to do certain testing, you have to have certain educational degrees. And so in order to do that, it's going to require us to kind of create something specific for those roles. Likewise, you have to have 2 people certified in the same thing. One is the primary, the second to verify that work. And so all of that will be reviewed.
Same question, but for the issues with the lack of and underpaid GCIC technicians. Is this in the budget book, and if so, what is the title of that position?
So those position titles are warrant techs. And so there are some changes to that unit. We did do some in the last paper. And so we have adjusted those salaries, but there is further analysis that is taking place for those.
Okay. One question I had, this may be for Madam HR Commissioner, but I have papers in the Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee that I plan on pushing out this coming week because they don't really do anything other than asking you and others to take specific actions. One of them is creating an FTO incentive. Another is implementing shift differential on the night and morning shifts. What would it take to implement those?
I've actually had discussions with, I believe I was here for the presentation when, I think it was a budget presentation from one of the labor units that raised the issue initially. We've had discussions about it, and I think we've identified the costs associated with it. I have been in discussions with the CFO about it to make sure that we look at how when it comes forward and the impact of it, because we were trying to identify how many FTOs we had, if we were going to need additional, and as far as the shift differential, there's a little bit more work that takes place with that, but I mean, there's not something that we were in disagreement with. It just takes a little bit more time to process, but yes, we were definitely looking at that from the previous discussions that we had from that previous budget presentation. I can't remember the name of the police labor unit that came in and mentioned it first. I don't remember her name. But yes, it's underway.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Bakhtiari, followed by the chairman.
Yep, had another question. Is it true, well, let me start with my 911 question. Does any of the personnel, any of the staffing issues or any money changes, funding changes, does any of this include anybody within our E911 department?
So we did do analysis on E911. They are not included in this paper. They will be in a separate legislation moving forward, but there is analysis going on specifically related to 911.
Got it. Well, thank you. Will that be before we approve the budget, or is that a separate paper that is coming after the fact?
I can tell you that I have met with the chief as well as Ms. Arnold regarding that. What we're doing right now, I guess I didn't want to put it out there prematurely, but we're looking at an operational change that will have impact with that. That's why we couldn't put it in this paper.
Got it.
But the operational change will bring forward that information. I just don't want to state it publicly now because we need to finish taking it through administration.
Totally understand. I'm asking again for the budget amendment purpose.
Yes.
So I
and
should hold
hopefully
off
we
on
can
that.
get it in early, but we have to make sure that because it's an operational change that involves shifts and the number of hours worked, we need to look at it a little bit more and look at the fiscal impact. But my conversation with the leadership at police was that there was capacity for that there.
Okay. Would you, Commissioner, would you mind sending that when you are able to those of us who are interested, or to the people that are currently, to the council members, so that once again, there's not a duplication of efforts when it comes to, you know, like if we're going to submit amendments, I prefer not to submit amendments for things that are actually going to happen.
Okay, so let me just say this. For the police support operations for the civilian employees, the global look that we just recently took in all the meetings that we had within the last 2 weeks, I will provide the council with all the information from our classification and compensation director that she was able to come up with along with Ms. Pascal to share with you exactly the movements that are being made. I believe the employees who were impacted there as well, because the global look, there were changes that were substantial across the support services staff for police. So you'll get all of those, and E911 is included. Okay. E911, latent, crime lab, I think it was, what was the other one with Ms.? Who did we meet with yesterday?
Police reports, property. So there's a multitude of different.
It's basically, we tried to capture the entire support component for police to make sure, because we realized that that will not be able to wait for the general employees class and comp, because they were mission critical positions and we needed to retain the talent. We also created ladders in a lot of those different positions. So there's a career progression from the entry level up to those who are actually licensed that Ms. Pascal mentioned.
Great.
Or
So better
required
retention.
license. Yes.
Wonderful. I look forward to that breakdown, and apologize for any other questions that I may ask that you have to shut me down on, because that work is still ongoing. Ms. Pascal, another question I have is, I don't know how I did not know this, but I was unaware that we no longer, is it true that we no longer have a vice department?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Do we don't have vice officers within APD right now?
So we do have I don't think they're classified in the unit as vice, but we do have special operations, which that would fall under.
And so the special operations division handles issues around human trafficking and
Yes.
prostitution? Okay.
Yes, they would handle those.
Is there a current analysis and breakdown we have of all current officers to ensure that we have a full understanding of how pay and how the flow chart works? Because one of my concerns with the breakdown is that I had last year that I still have now is this department, many of our departments are, I mean, City Hall is, this being top heavy and understanding if whether or not I know that we're in a competition right now with many other cities and municipalities, but having a better understanding of where we are and that our money, the money that is allocated to this department is actually being distributed in a way that is sustainable and responsible is something I would love to have a better understanding of.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like being back down here again. Are any of the personnel actions, it's hard to tell just from the title, any of them in the license and permits division?
License and permits?
Yeah, this may be for Ms. Pascal. License and permits within APD.
So license and permits, that is one area that we already had above entry authorization for. And so those positions are currently posted.
Okay.
It's just a matter of being able to fill them all.
Okay, but none of these actions specifically apply to license and permits, correct?
No.
Okay. And then my other question is, the foundation typically has just funded equipment and supplies. They've never funded actual positions, right?
No. Now, they do fund or have a program for referrals, so they do fund that.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a breakdown of those finances?
Of the referral?
A breakdown of understanding what has been funded in, let's say, the past 5 years by what the foundation has assisted with, just to have a better understanding, because I think that we take a lot of things at face value without understanding the breakdown, and I think the more we understand, the better equipped we are to make decisions. No, but I'm asking if that's something we can get a hold of. Okay. Naming that and just stating that I would love to actually, a few of us actually would love to understand that breakdown a bit better. Thank you.
Okay.
You know, it also could be that would be a good question for the finance department, seeing as they have dual reporting obligations. Okay, anything else for the proposed APD personnel transactions? Let's move on to procurement.
Procurement, total of 20 transactions for abolish positions based on the assessment of the organization's operational needs, classification title amendments to support reorganization, reclassification with and without incumbent to better align resources with the job functions that need to be performed. If we have a representative from procurement, can you please come forward?
While he approaches, let me ask a kind of a generic HR type question. To what extent are you beholden to federal regulations in terms of having to make these classifications, having to, make sure you color within the lines what you can and can't do, or is all this just City of Atlanta
Oh, no.
custom?
It's not all City of Atlanta. We look at, there are different things that come into the mix of all things HR when it comes to the classifications. But depending on whether they're wage and hour positions or salary positions, there are lines that we have to stay between, depending on what type of position it is, whether it's salaried or a wage and hour employee, the benefits that correlate with it, whether it's part-time, full-time. So they're depending on what type of position it is, whether it's confidential or there are a myriad of different things that come into play when we look at that. But if there are any concerns that we would have from a legal perspective, we definitely would go to our legal department. But for the most part, everything within the HR space, as far as it comes to classification, we've been able to manage it to date. When we have questions, we will take it to Ms. Hickson.
During my time here, I don't ever remember hearing about any federal entity coming in here and saying that, HR has done something improper or anything like that.
I hope you don't ever have that, especially while I'm here.
Yeah,
We're going to try to keep it that way.
I share that. Okay, any questions about the proposed 20 transactions for procurement? Go ahead.
Yes. One, I just want to thank you all. Just the turnaround and so many things has been fantastic. And my question is, I know that there was an ask. I know that there was for a lot of positions that needed to see a $10,000 to $20,000 increase in order to be competitive. Are you all getting what you need?
Good afternoon. Kevin Floyd, Deputy Chief Procurement Officer. Absolutely. The
Don't worry, Commissioner Smith
reclassifications-
isn't looking at you. You can answer completely honestly.
No, we absolutely are getting what we need. So the reclassifications are turning the support positions that we had into strategic sourcing positions that we'll be able to fill. And in the budget presentation that we gave, I talked about the hiring. We've hired like 30 people in the last 6 months. We sent out 5 offers on Monday, got 5 acceptances same day.
Fantastic.
So thankfully, where we're at, the salary range is competitive, and we're having success in recruiting a large number of fantastic people.
I'm so happy to hear that, because I know that with some of the changes and the fact that, we had a new commissioner that came in and started instilling new things that have, as far as we are concerned, have been quite effective. I know that there were some leadership positions that fell off, and so I just wanted to make sure that you all have been able to successfully replace those.
Yeah, we're still recruiting for some director positions to shore up the leadership, but I don't see any impediments to that.
And I hope the current construction is going well, and I hope that you get a window soon instead of being in a bunker. So,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Anything else for procurement? Okay, seeing none, there's nothing for public defender, which takes us to Public Works.
Next, Public Works, Department of Public Works has a total of 58 transactions. If you have a representative, please come forward. Position creations to support the increase in workload. Position transfers to reallocate resources in the most effective way to support specific business needs. Reclassification with incumbent to allocate resources to better manage contract vendor compliance with assigned work for solid waste billing, payroll support, and provide financial direction for over $100 million.
Okay, and I think we're going to want to hear a little bit more about what's behind the proposed position creations as well as the position transfers.
Okay.
Yeah, just maybe.
Deputy Commissioner Keith Robinson, the position creations that we've created, we're going to support the right-of-way maintenance. In addition to that, illegal dumping, in terms of the strike force, and then also with the strike force, we're looking at the homeless encampment as well. So those are some of the positions that we're creating. In addition to that, there's some other key critical positions that the department has never had as it relates to our facility management position, which does not exist, a security manager and a couple of, safety officers as well. So the positions that are being created are actually going to impact, operations. So these are needed positions.
Okay, and then tell us about the position transfers.
Those position transfers, those were which ones were those again? Gotcha. Yeah, so some of those positions are the ones that we had in, from the solid waste fund that we're transferring over into the special services. So those are what some of those positions are.
Okay, Mr. Wan.
So I'm surprised I'm not seeing more actions in terms of the solid waste and the activity there, because we've heard during the presentation about the vacancy challenges and hiring challenges there. So what's the logic or rationale for not doing those?
Right now, you're absolutely right. That's a great question, Councilmember Wan. So we do have enough positions already created, so those positions are vacant. So we're in the process of actually filling some of those vacancies as it relates to some of the solid waste, curbside collections. And as we have more ASL delivered to the department, that will also decrease the need on some of the other positions that may be required. So as we continue to look at some of our operational efficiencies, we're going to actually looking at right sizing the operation.
So, but are there no actions that need to be taken for those vacant positions if we're having a problem recruiting, is my question. I guess that's...
Okay, the problem recruiting is more on the fleet side, where we have a difficult time in actually looking at mechanics. So we're also in the process of actually bringing an outside firm to provide recruitment efforts as we relate to our mechanics on fleet.
But not in solid waste?
No, we're not having a difficulty in recruiting right now as it relates to solid waste for our ESWs and drivers. So.
All right, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, anything else?
Yes, if you could speak also, so you said you're not having a problem on the solid waste side. It's curbside. You said issues don't exist within solid waste?
Yeah, not right now.
But it is on the other
On the fleet services side, where we're having the challenges, that is correct.
Would you say those challenges are related? Could you kind of elaborate?
Yeah, nationwide, there's a challenge finding qualified technicians, so not just the city of Atlanta has difficulties in finding these positions, but even private dealers have a hard time finding technicians as well. Hence, that's why we're going with an outside firm to look for some of those technicians that may be out nationwide.
We're to accommodate the, so let me first ask, is that due to the competitive with the private market in terms of salary?
Absolutely.
And once we get certified folks in those positions, how are our retention rates?
Our retention rates have been fairly decent, but there's some, areas where we see that some of our employees are leaving for the private sector, but some that have left for the private sector have wanted to come back to the city as well, too, just with some of the demands that may exist within the private sector.
Okay.
This is one of those areas where we have an opportunity for improvement in terms of the recruitment and looking at the role, the licensing, and everything that takes place, and even trying to do something along the lines, I don't want to call it an apprenticeship, but somewhere where we have some type of pipeline where we can get to these mechanics, because it's a niche of a profession, and it's, like he said, very difficult to recruit for these positions. But in my conversations with the commissioner, we've discussed not just relinquishing to the consultants, but also making a concerted effort from the HR side for recruitment as well.
Okay.
But we do know that we needed to look at the job description and probably make some changes before we continue to try to recruit from our space.
To the improvements to make.
Yes.
I got it. I know that face well enough and that tone well enough at this point to leave it there. And I also, as of right now, is there any outsourcing that needs to be, has the department been dependent at all on outsourcing in order to make ends meet?
On the fleet side, absolutely. So we do outsource some of our vehicles to outside vendors.
I'd imagine that is drawing up quite a cost. So
Yes, that it is.
I'm looking forward to understanding better, to going in more to how we can improve the process. But I did want to also ask, it's great that we're focusing on supervisor positions and these technical positions. Do you feel that you have been given what you need in order to support the folks that are foundational to this, that are not in supervisor positions, but are the support staff?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely do have what we need in terms of the support staff. One of the things that we were challenged with, what we noticed early on when the department split, ADOT and Public Works, there was a lack of actual professional positions that were in the department. So these are some of the positions that kind of help right-size the department as well, too.
Okay, thank you. And if there's any way that you would be able to talk with us offline about how much outsourcing has cost in terms of inflated rates of spending, that would be really.
Yeah, we can definitely have those conversations,
really
absolutely.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I don't think you've got enough guys out there collecting. You do a great job of picking up the trash and the recycling. But as you know, I have spent 4 Saturdays going out and taking 20, 30, 40 pictures of missed yard trimmings. And I know there's an issue with people who hire landscapers, and then you have more bags and whatever. But today, while we're talking about personnel, what I've observed is there just is not, it's still not working. And I gave Mr. Wiggins, Commissioner Wiggins, the benefit. I said, okay, he said, give me 30 days, 60 days, whatever. But right now, where we're talking about personnel, I'm a little concerned that there, quote, is enough personnel when I clearly don't see the result of that. There either aren't enough trucks, or there isn't enough personnel, or they're missing complete streets. Something is going on, because for 2 months I have gone, April and May, and now into June. For over 2 months, I've been documenting with photographs and have sent them to the department. So right now, the workers, not the supervisors, not the management, but the workers, to be able to truly pick up all of the yard trimmings every other week for an entire part of the city. And I'm just looking at my own council district, but it's it's a gargantuan task. And the people aren't behaving as well as they need to behave, but it doesn't, but here we come up to budget, and if you need another 20 guys to help with yard trimmings, we want to know, but so we can make an amendment next week.
No, so we do have the vacancies to actually hire the folks, but what you did mention was the equipment challenges, and we, as a department, we have ordered a lot of the vehicles, and there's actually a long lead time in getting some of those vehicles. So within this month, vehicles that we may have ordered maybe a year ago are starting to come in. So we'll have a reduced, those equipment challenges should be less of a challenge, over the next couple of months, because a big chunk of that has been our equipment failure that we've had. In addition to that, what we've done also during the fall part of the year, when we've actually used contractors to assist with the yard trimmings, that's when we've had the greatest bang for our buck. We really look at it as that's when the landscapers have reduced time for business, and that's when they're able to also, the contractors that we did use to actually assist us.
It got better.
Yeah, it got better. But like I said, those equipment challenges will be less of a challenge moving forward.
Okay, but you've got the positions that you need.
We do have
you just
positions
need
that
to
we can actually fill. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else for Public Works? All right, let's move on to the, I believe, solicitor.
Solicitor, total of 34 personnel actions. Above entry for classification in order to attract and maintain skilled talent. Position creation support litigation of nuanced cases related to the mayor's safe and secure housing initiative, city code violation, and support diversion special programs. I think that's supposed to be nuisance cases. Yeah, nuisance cases. Reclassification with and without incumbent for better organizational alignment and our budget neutral. If there's someone from the solicitor's office, can you please come forward?
Well, and I know council as well as administration would love to see these additional positions to tackle some of the various things that have kind of really bothered us. I assume that is what your position creations accomplish. But if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. My name is Wendell Bryan. I am the Program Management Officer for the City Office of the City Solicitor. So we have 22 new creations. Those 22 new creations, the majority of them are driven by two things. One is the implementation of our new tracking system, and secondly, the abatement of nuisance properties, and a whole team that's going to be focused on that.
Okay, questions about the solicitor's function? Ms. Bacteria.
Thank you so much. Very, 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 well, maybe not simple question, but just one. These positions that we have allocated for, I'm really glad to see additional support coming into the solicitor's office. You have really fantastic people in that department. I know that the workload is absolutely insane and something beyond comprehension for us, because I know that if my colleagues are having anywhere near as much come to you all as my district is, then I think my district just needs its own solicitor's office. It's ridiculous. So will this be, is this support that y'all are receiving in this paper, is that going to get you what you need to begin moving faster on nuisance class actions, on other things that are coming before us, things that we have had in the pipeline for a few months now, or sometimes even longer, to a year? Is this going to be able to give you the assistance you need to get moving on some of these cases?
So yes, with the increased funding that we are receiving, absolutely.
Okay. I'm really glad to hear it. Thank you.
Anything else for solicitor? All right. Watershed Management, 129 transactions.
Yes. Position abolishments to eliminate unnecessary positions and align organizational structure. The majority of these positions are administrative and vacant. Position transfer to align resources in the appropriate cost center. Reclassification with and without incumbent is vital to support the department's efficiency, strategic placement of staff, to maximize workforce resources, and to align roles to match responsibilities. If there's a representative for Watershed, can you please come forward?
Okay,
Are we all
because
alone?
this is a lot of abolishments, and
Yes.
so, yeah, if you could just tell us what's behind that, that'd be great.
Good afternoon. The majority of the abolishments, they are non-mission critical positions. They're age positions, and they're mostly administrative positions.
And who made that determination? Was it the department? Was that y'all? Was that joint?
That was a departmental decision.
Mr. Ellis, and then Mr. Warren.
So I know that, the explanation here says the majority of those abolition positions are administrative and vacant, as you just reiterated, but are they currently funded or unfunded, or is it a mix? And if it's a mix, what is the mix?
All those positions are funded.
Are unfunded?
Funded.
They are funded positions?
Yes.
Okay.
So Watershed has currently, we'll still have 253 vacant positions after these 75 are abolished.
Okay, I'll defer to my colleagues for their questions. I may have more.
Okay, so that number, 200 and some odd vacancies, that's pretty jaw-dropping, and I know that the commissioners come forward and talked about hiring challenges, yet I'm seeing essentially 35 reclassification actions that would potentially be a strategy to enhance the attractiveness and retention of those positions. Should there be other actions to help with that vacancy number?
I can address that. You want to?
Go ahead.
There are ongoing conversations. We were meeting with Watershed as late as last week about that because of some of the reorg that's taking place and just looking globally across the organization to do just that. Same thing across the entire enterprise where we've had challenges with retention, recruitment, and pay. We just can't get to all the departments fast enough, but we are just looking at, individually, we spoke to like maybe 2 work groups just recently regarding compensation and hours and shift differential, different concerns that they've raised. Now that they've bubbled up to the commissioner, we are continuing to have those discussions, but there's opportunity enterprise-wide for exactly what you're asking.
Yeah, I just hope we're not putting too much weight in the pay and class study and the timing on that when we've got some of these departments. We've talked about transportation, we've talked about planning. This is another one that to me is fairly critical in terms of our responsibility to the public. And I like what buildings did or planning did in terms of triaging and prioritizing mission critical and going ahead and addressing any adjustments we need to make now.
And hopefully sustain.
Yeah, and sustain. But I'm just going to send that signal out. I'm glad you're having the conversations. Know that, again, there's appetite, and it's unfortunate that we can't capture some of that now while we're with personnel.
We are incrementally in the departments where we have, because we don't make the operational decisions once we sit down, because the commissioner also has to bring their operational teams in the SMEs, and then we look at it with the classification and compensation director as well as talent to see where we can make those changes and immediately. And some we've even had like, okay, we may need to do a micro job fair or something like that. But it's a matter of the commissioners bringing it forward in their SME so we can have the conversations to see, okay, how many of these do we need and where do we need them and when do we need them? So,
and then the abolishment of the funded vacant positions, that I guess is reflected in a change in their personnel line item, budget line item, right? I don't have my.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I want to preface what I'm about to say by Commissioner Titi. I have all the faith in the world in you and your team. Y'all have, you've hit the ground running. Watershed is arguably one of the most responsive departments, if not is fantastic at getting back to all of us. And to echo Councilmember Juan, the appetite is there to give you all what you need. And I also want to echo again that I think that all of us should hear is that when we sit here and we, as we should, really be proud of the fact that we have the largest budget we've ever worked on and can tout the largest reserves the city's ever had, but then simultaneously hear about the vacancies you have and how critical Watershed is to having a city. Watershed and DPW are two of the most foundational departments in the city. Yes, ATL, DOT, and city planning are very sexy, but these two departments are foundational to survival in this city and to make sure y'all have what you need so that you can actually do the work you need to do. I also don't know if we need a pay and class. I know the importance of the pay and class study, but vacancy rates, pay compression issues, issues we have with retention is enough to tell us that there needs to be decisions made now, and that pay and class can further either validate or further get into the nuances and details of what we need to do. But I mean, to echo my colleagues, it doesn't feel like this is combating what you all need for the vacancy rates this department has and the workload that you all have, and you do it beautifully. I mean, what you're hearing is compliments and the desire to help you do that job even better. So.
The other piece of it is, Jonathan Williams, Deputy Commissioner, that every person can't do every one of these jobs. A lot of these are very specific and require people with skill set and capacity that's
I'm so sorry, could you start over? Councilman Westmoreland interrupted you.
What I was saying is just because we have an opening, all potential bidders may not meet that. Some of these jobs require very specific type of capacity, education, and experience. So just because there's 200 people and we have 200 openings does not necessarily solve the problem. So.
Very fair, and I will be the first to say that I'm not the expert in this field or what you all need. It's just a desire. We're on just on face value, looking at the vacancy rates, looking at what you all need, and looking at the breakdown of personnel here. It just seems on its face that it's not enough, and that's because we want to support all of our departments. We really want to make sure that y'all are supported.
We appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just want to reiterate what my colleagues brought up, and, I understand there's high numbers of vacancies, and, I trust y'all went through those and came up with these 72 abolishments, but, I mean, we're not, the civil engineers, watershed managers, others that seem to be important to your mission. And then, what did you say that the vacancy rate would, or not vacancy rate, but the number of vacant positions funded after the abolishments occur?
It'll still be 253 positions.
Okay, well, I mean, if that's the case, and to Councilmember Bakhtiari's point, I mean, if we have 250 positions, open positions, and, all of our departments are important, but, watershed management is pretty far up there in providing people clean and safe drinking water, and you've only got 30-ish reclassifications. To me, there should be a whole lot more than that if we have that level of vacant positions.
Many of the positions that were abolished, as she mentioned, were administrative in nature and non-mission critical. And so we're seeking to focus on those folks who have specific skill sets. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So y'all have no vacancies in, I guess, what you would call more public-facing jobs. I mean, you can look at SLAs that Commissioner Browning so eloquently provides every quarterly.
Yes.
Unlike our colleagues sometimes. But, I mean, there's delays in getting repairs done, whether it's hydrant repairs, water line breaks, severe delays in restorations. So, I mean, while
those positions
there are a number of
are not
those,
part
I mean,
of
they're
what
not all
we're talking about
administrative.
We're seeking to find people who are applicants for those positions. The ones that have been abolished are, again, not mission critical, not customer facing, and wouldn't fall under the category that you're speaking to.
Right, but I understand the abolishments, but with all of those 200 remaining open
253,
positions,
yes,
it would seem to me there to be a whole lot more reclassifications to make those positions more attractive to people if we're trying to recruit people to fill those.
Not necessarily to reclass. We can look at that, but part of the problem is, like Mr. Williams mentioned, is the qualifications and finding, just as we have the issue with the mechanics, finding the skill sets and a specific licensing for the candidates when they come forward, because we may have a ton of people to apply, but if they don't have the specific licensing or the credentialing for the positions, we can't bring them on board. So I do know that the commissioner has been having conversations about what we can do at the lower level, where we have the talent that's, or entry level, I should say, the talent that's in-house for what we can bring on the employees and try to put them through a program where they can matriculate and get some of the licensing, or we can work with, some of our incumbents. But there are just some of these credentials that are not available in the marketplace that are readily available for us to be able to onboard.
And we absolutely have programs that are intended to educate people so they can pass the test to get to these, and they're not easy transitions in all cases.
Right.
So we do consider reclassifications where it's possible and movement for people just to provide career advancement as well. It's a good thing for people who are there. It's just more complicated than that.
In the conversations that I've had with the commissioner, once we get this talent on board, this is the talent that we try to retain and make sure that we are creating a proper succession plan and a pipeline for us to continue to, maintain this type of talent. But again, going back to the abolishment of many of the positions, when I came into the organization, we looked enterprise-wide at positions that were obsolete, titles that weren't even used anymore. And a lot of times when we say a position is being abolished, you may have 5 or 6 of those that have position numbers assigned to them, and you don't need all of them. So we collapse it, and you may have one. So there may be duplicates where you see abolishments, and it looks like a lot of them, but it may be 15 of the same thing. We don't need that many of those anymore, or the classification. So not having had the classification and compensation study for so many years, it's a matter of kind of purging and restarting with the commissioners that we have in place who can actually look at the operation and say, we need X, Y, Z, and we don't need these anymore. We need this many of however many or whatever it is for that particular operation. And I believe that's what Mr. Williams is referring to when he says that, yes, we have all the positions, we're just not getting the candidates because they don't have the credentials.
And we made assessments of all of the positions to see if they could be fit into other places. And again, back to the training that they were provided. Some of these folks have to pass testing to meet certain technical requirements. So we investigate all of that because we would really prefer to keep folks who are familiar with what we offer and what we're doing for the public. So this is indicative of those decisions.
I just wanted to mention, because we're here, about the mission critical positions, because I hear you, Ms. Norwood, I hear you, Mr. Juan, Ms. Routier, I hear all of you with the mission critical positions, like the bulk waste and the solid waste, curbside, all of that. What's happening is we are not going to wait until the class comes when it comes to mission critical positions and service delivery. Where we have those conversations with commissioners, our talent team dives right in, has those conversations. If we have to make those adjustments, we've been fully authorized by administration and the CFO to get those positions filled where we can find the talent. So please don't think that there's any time that we're going to delay or wait until the class and comp for us to make those moves in order, to impact service delivery or to make sure that our employees are even taken care of. Because we've also looked at the monies that are being spent on consultants, use that money to incentivize our incumbents. If we do that, we get retention that way as well. So please don't think that we're waiting until, the end of the class and comp to do that. And when we do make those incremental adjustments, we are in conversation with Evergreen, our consultant, to make sure that they understand we've already addressed this with you. Don't forget, we don't need to do that again. So cut down on the time for that, and we can move forward with positions that need to be viewed.
And to Commissioner Smith's point, we have made adjustments since the last budget was approved to make sure that we're competitive and that there's parity with other organizations and inside and outside the city.
Well, just one last request I'll make, since there's such a large number of the positions being abolished. I would just request for a breakdown of what office or division those are in, OLEO, OCCBS, et cetera. If you could provide that for us.
Not a problem.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Westmoreland. I thought your hand was up. I apologize. Okay. Commissioner, walk us through your final slide here with the 3 items you have enumerated.
Okay. That's a discussion that we were just having. The abolishment of positions, there were like 96. You have a listing of them in the back of the book on page 222, listing positions that are no longer used within the departments or we are abolishing in preparation for the classification and compensation study. That's page 222 and 223, leading over to 224. The next item. Oh, I didn't know if there were any questions. Okay, the next item is correcting the salary pay range for EL4. We had EL3 and EL5. We don't know why there wasn't an EL4. So we just wanted to make sure that we corrected the pay plan to include that.
Okay, that's interesting, all right.
It was.
Yeah.
I found it very interesting. And replacing this is basically a correction, replacing current Atlanta Police Department's compensation program. In the last paper, we presented, was it the COLA? The steps?
Yeah, well, it was the, kind of like the cleanup paper that we did, the last personnel paper. Yeah, and that's where we did the adjustment with the COLA, yes, with all of the pay grades.
So it was just to make the correction there.
Ms. Norwood.
Yes, I just want to understand the list. So when I look at a zoning inspector or a building inspector supervisor, that is not that entire class, that category is gone, but that this particular position is gone. Okay,
Correct.
thanks.
I've got a couple just underlying process questions that have cropped up here. First of all, you're right, of course, this is a living document. It's a highly over-caffeinated living document. And so none of us are excited, but we do expect to see a substitute in committee, and we expect to see another substitute on the floor. My request is that you provide us with a synopsis of those changes, and if you could format them along the lines of the questions we've been asking today. That's going to save us wear and tear when we take up your latest proposed changes. So a long time ago, there was a personnel paper proposed that was heavily larded with major pay increases for the top managers in this city. And that resulted in a controversy, which resulted in the creation of something called the Compensation Commission, which I think has ceased to operate, but you'll tell me if it still exists in some form or fashion. At the time, it was a mix. It was the HR commissioner. It was somebody, in the top person in the mayor's office. It was, law was in there. There was a council person in there, and labor was represented. I said, does anything like that still exist? And aside from that, who does scrub the top level pay increases, of which there's more than a few in this document?
First question, I am not aware of a compensation commission. I can ask, that's clearly BT.
Well, you'd know if it existed.
But I can definitely ask about that, and when I'm not aware of it now. I've been here for like 8 months. I can find out whether or not, when the last time it existed, and actually the composition of it. And are you asking whether it can come back forward, or?
No, I was on it at that time. The administration was very unexcited about populating it for kind of generic reasons. The thing is, it ended up working really well, and I think everyone was really happy for it, and the additional sort of backseat driving ended up with the administration saying, yeah, you know what, we actually don't want to do that on a couple of occasions. But
Look, I think that was a construct of the then council president, but I do think it was created. So I do think there is a paper trail we can go back and find that addressed the composition. But I think I agree with Mr. Shook. It was helpful, even if it was just a periodic sounding board, ideas around equipment, education reimbursement, things like that came out of it that could be low-hanging fruit short of actual compensation.
yeah, it was really the main focus was to look at, the higher salary hires and the, above entry, the ones that came in really above entry.
I do have a clarifying question. I was under the impression that we did have this base committee, but that it was just dormant because it hasn't been revisited in a while or staffed, or people have not been appointed to it. I don't know if that's correct or not, but okay.
It's a research project for me. I have to look for that.
You got some free time,
The
right?
clerk's office. Yeah, sure.
And then I know you're a tad busy this time of year, and if you've sent it and I just haven't seen it, I apologize, but I'm looking forward to getting my annual
Shook report.
the Shook report.
Yes, I am told by the preparer, who's someplace in this room, that she normally provides it after the budget to make sure it's as accurate as it can be.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, other question? Mr. Warren?
And this was just don't need it now. I know that yesterday during the executive office's presentation, I had made a request regarding kind of piecing the office, the policy office,
Yes.
since it was coming from different departments, as well as it's not clear to me as I look at the personnel actions, what are related to that particular function. So I did not expect you to have that by today. So maybe you and I can talk hopefully by next Wednesday, or if there's a problem, we can talk about that as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll get it to you.
Other questions or comments before we wrap this up? I know we're all wanting to prolong a process that will otherwise end now.
I think, Councilmember, you look like you wanted to say something. You good?
Take a 15-minute recess and come back.
Thank you, HR.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, so in terms of the budget, this concludes the departmental budget briefings. Next stop is Wednesday's Finance Committee, during which we will take up the personnel paper and the budget and any other related ordinances, including the mill paper. And on that day, June 14th, there will be two public hearings, both in this chamber, one at noon and one at 6 p.m. These are both state required public hearings for the tax mill rate, and so technically they're not really about the budget. They're opportunities for people to come in to talk about the proposed tax mill that's going to help pay for this budget. And then June 20th at the full council meeting, what emerges from committee on the 14th will come before the full council. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank all the members who have been here throughout, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.